we are Midnight Ranting on Abiogenesis on trial. Specifically, we are throwing some after-party fun on the debate of Sal versus Taylor, or Sal and Taylor versus Grayson and Amy of Abiogenesis on trial, the link of which is in the description below. But let's have some fun with James W. and myself, Amy Newman, with some 4 billion years in the making. Woohoo! What is up, y'all? I am sending love to you out there on the interwebs. We are indeed Midnight Ranting on Abiogenesis on trial. Gay Biogenesis. I am sitting here actually with my lights off. Hello, because the light is kind of killing me. I am having a migraine, which is bad timing because I would like to at least hear. I'll listen to what James has to say about the debate. I thought it was a really fun debate. I thought Grayson was on fire, and it also allowed me, in my opinion, to ask some questions that I thought they never really answered. And so I thought it was a good back and forth. And so, what are your thoughts, James?
Well, yeah, like you say, lots of questions that weren't really answered. Lots of conflating theories and hypotheses, which is pretty much a basic thing in a science debate. Yeah, just a lot of obfuscation, a lot of really trying hard not to understand, which is actually something we get quite a lot from this other side, that they almost put effort into not understanding something. And even when it's broken down and explained piece by piece and spoon fed to them, and they still just resist it like a obstinate toddler, not wanting to eat their veggies. Yeah, not wanting to, like, it's impossible. It's impossible. It can't happen. It's I thought Grayson's point about not being able to talk probability when we don't have a mechanism yet, because when they're like, oh, what is the probability of a protein forming randomly? Well, yeah, randomly it might be pretty damn low, but we don't know the precise mechanism that this happened yet. So, once we figure that out, yeah.
I think we also kept on stressing hypothesis over and over, and yet
right. You had
that
to drill
seems
that
to
home.
get conflated with evolution because they don't believe in evolution.
I thought that you had some good points, just basically affirming the philosophy of science, affirming like the way we do reasoning, the way that we construct hypotheses and theories, and um, how we basically apply methodological naturalism um, to the natural world to come up with models, theories that work.
That actually
You'll hear
make us claims.
you'll hear sometimes scientists will say, they say all models are wrong, but some are useful. That doesn't mean that they're wrong per se, colloquially. It just means they're not perfect. You can find in every model there is a, a tweak that can make it maybe a little bit better. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Just means
It's really why science is so great, because we can make our models better.
Well, that's why the highest order of thought is called a theory. We don't just call things like the law of evolution. We call it a theory because it has lots of moving parts and those moving parts are subject to being tweaked and adjusted here and there as necessary. But the whole evolution is not going anywhere. It's not seriously being questioned by anybody. Although I did see Nephilim Free poke his head in side chat a little bit, like he is basically been in hiding from the debate sphere. He was just posting a lot of his boilerplate nonsense about DNA and stuff like that. Basically, exactly what you would expect from the likes of Nephilim Free. What struck me was like it sounded like they didn't even listen to you. Like I was just watching Taylor. It didn't even seem like they paid attention to you guys' statement. It was just in that regard. I don't know.
Well, no, I agree, because I think what was happening was Grayson was bringing up points that I think were maybe emotionally, hitting them a little bit, and so they felt compelled to, to respond to him. But that gave me a little bit of free reign to make some comments that, in my opinion, they just absorbed.
Yeah, they really didn't engage with it. It seems like they had like a script, like game plan, and they tried to stick to that, not deviate from it too much. Sometimes Sal, he gets like certain things that you say that really like strike a nerve with him, and he kind of gets a little annoyed with it, and kind of reacts like that.
Yeah.
Kind of in someone else made the comment passive aggressive, which I don't really like to use that term because people just take it as a negative thing. But he did get kind of annoyed by certain things. I think part of that is just the fact that he's an intelligent person. He has all these degrees, but he just believes some very silly things. And why that is, I don't know. Religion.
But yeah, what I'm going to say, I'm going to just put it is on the screen. Come join the panel. I'm going to give a quick shout out, and then we're going to open the open mic. We're going to let Immutable on, and I'm going to gracefully just slip out and listen while I send love to all of you. But I'm really glad that the debate happened. I thought it was fun. And I don't think they had a lot to offer in return. Once again, I think Sal's a nice guy. I was hoping Taylor would say, she's almost a wild card in that regard. So I was looking forward. But yeah.
You'll be streaming tomorrow?
That is true. I have to get that up. I'm going to be streaming from Purple Rhymes with Orange is running a 48-hour stream. And so go check that out. I have to get that set up. But yes. So with that, I just want to very quickly send love.
We got Ember too. Good to see Ember.
Good to see you. Oh, well, I want to just send everyone out in the live chat. Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, Sunny, share. If you do, it lets us send all of the lovely people. Lets us see you. What's up, Dr. Dinah? Always good to see you in the debate.
Dr. Dino,
Missing Mod, Sydney
There's
Raptor,
Grayson out there.
Regos. It's a Rubik's. What's up, Rubik's? What's up, Sumami and Maya? Thank you for the love. And Binge Thinker, and all right. I just want to also, there are many ways you can support the channel. You can send in super chats. You can send in super thanks afterwards. You can join our channel membership with our evolving badge system that just triggers creationists because it is things that evolve. You can also join our Patreon at patreon.com/Amy Newman. and it cuts around all the red tape, gets all sorts of extra stuff. But also, I want to thank our supporters. I want to thank Dale Pastel and Chris Disciple and Dave Garr and James Wolfe and Rachel Holland and the amazing Ian Davenport and Rejos. Woo! Thank you, Ian and Rejos. Thank you, all of our supporters. But let's get into it. Let's get into the open mic. I'm going to get Immutable, Ember, and Sinister Porpoise on. Say whatever you would like to say, and then tell me when you're done, and we'll go on to the next. Oh, are you good at doing that, James? Getting them?
That's fine.
All right. Nonetheless, let's get people on.
They're all not going to talk over anybody.
That is true. First of all, I just want to send love to both Mutable, Sinister, and Ember. I am going to go 3, 2, 1. We are open micing. All right, I was going back and forth. I'll get all of them on, and then once it's truly open mic. But Immutable, we are Midnight Ranting on Abiogenesis on trial. How are you, and what are your thoughts about the debate or the topic itself?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Pretty good.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. I saw some of the debate. I mean, I was mostly interested, like when I checked the modern day debate thing, to see what Taylor was going to say.
Oh boy.
And I kind of just stopped watching at the opening when she was going on this nonsense about like how we developed like these ideas about Genesis in the 1920s, and it's just gone downhill from there. And for me, I immediately just clocked out there because I'm like, yeah, it doesn't seem like she's done any kind of reading on the technical literature, and just kind of pushing this idea of like
getting worse.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like one of Sal's talking points of like, oh, the more we learn, the worse it actually gets, because the more you have to account for the first cell to exist, and it's like,
the cell is more complex
just like,
than we thought.
Yeah, and it's just like there's a lot of weird things that she was saying, and it's just like, yeah, I can anticipate how the rest of this debate's gonna go, and just clocked out. But
are you familiar with her? Have you seen her previous performances?
No, I mean, like, I know that she exists. Like, I know that she's out there. I think she's like,
She is out there. That is the right word.
I think she's like a graduate student in biochemistry or something like that.
She famously remarked in a debate that evolution would be like throwing like a turkey in a pot of water and expecting a live turkey to come flying out. Like
that's something.
A live turkey's gonna come flying out. Yeah.
That kind of sounds very much like a Kent Hovinism or something like that you would hear. And unfortunately, like as shameful as it is to say, like as bad as Kent Hovind is, like he does have a social impact, and unfortunately you see a lot of people kind of like regurgitating the same kind of rhetoric that he.
That's what Sal did, because Kent Hovind, he was the first one to say, oh, well, the first one I heard say, like, well, even if they create life in the laboratory, that'll just prove it took intelligence to do it. Ha 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 ha. So you can't prove it because that would mean it took intelligence, right? Ha 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 ha. Yeah. No, Kent, if it's proof of concept. If we can do it in a laboratory, then it could happen without human intervention. We just don't have enough time to monitor everything. So we're trying to see if it can happen in the lab.
Yeah,
and do that, it can happen over billions of years on Earth.
And a really good point, like where that can be emphasized, not just in like the wet sciences like biology or chemistry or stuff like that, but Amy, am I correct in saying like that you're a programmer?
I am indeed.
So like, would it be safe to say, because I'm sure you've had different things where you're trying to model some phenomenon, and a lot of times, like at least for the kind of things that I'm interested in, like in mathematics and stuff that like you want to put into a computer to have it give you a reasonable result, there's this kind of trade-off you make between being precise with the program and having it run efficiently. Like, in theory, you could have a program that's like
Perfect,
effectively perfect, like an infinitely complex, like in how much specificity you require the computer to run, and compute in terms of variables. But it'll take a very long time for it to run if that complexity grows and grows and grows. Where what's oftentimes easier is to just minimize the kind of parameters that are effective and correct and treat the errors that occur as perturbations to the system. And a lot of times, that's what happens in science, and it's what you see with the mathematical modeling too, because there's not too much you can do in term. Let's put it this way: math is really, really hard. And even if you could do it, it's not entirely certain that the math you used could be programmed easy, or that it could be deciphered very easy, for trying to discern what prediction was actually made. And so oftentimes, simplicity is better preferred than, being highly, technical and precise with your program, unless you actually need to do it.
Yes, I would actually. It's a point that I've been trying to drill home for a while. It's not always, but sometimes, a lot of the time, a designer wants to make something that is simple. I always ask creationists, do you want a simple or a complex way of getting in your car? And they generally see where that's going, but many of them intuitively go, of course I want a simple way of getting in my car. Exactly. You don't really want to spend 5 minutes just having to open the door.
Well, and the thing is too, one thing that's especially true about human codes that's not always true of biological systems is human coded systems are extremely error prone. I mean, if you mess up the kind of variable that you input for some kind of function to call upon or something like that, or God forbid data gets corrupted in some file, well, it's a nightmare trying to figure out what exactly it is that went wrong, and trying to correct the program in such a way that it readapts, that it does the thing it was supposed to do the first time with this now, partially corrupted data set. Whereas biological systems, if you treat them with this kind of code analogy that's been proposed, they're fairly error prone. I mean, you can mess with a few things here and there, and they'll tolerate it fairly well. It won't disrupt the function all that much.
I feel like Sinister may want to ask a question because I saw her asking, but I really do have to head out. What I'm going to do, because I see Ember with his lovely hat and I see Sinister just being beautiful. We're going to just, Immutable, just you stick around with the panel. I'm just going to add in Ember, and then I am going to head out. And then Sinister is on deck. And all right. Thank you so much, Immutable, for your opening. Ember, welcome on board, everyone. We are Midnight Ranting, Abiogenesis on trial. Please go check out the debate. That's right, Gay Genesis. Go check out the debate on Modern Day Debate. However, I love you all. I'll be listening. And Ember, what are your thoughts?
Oh, well, Immutable covered most of the basics. I was expecting, first of all, I only caught the opening arguments because I'm multitasking, and, there's been issues with MDD lately, but I wanted to see what Amy had to say, what Grayson was going to do, and what the responses would be, so I snuck over and watched. And it was pretty much as expected, very well-reasoned presentations on one side, and it basically boiled down to nuh-uh on the other side.
Obfuscation.
Yeah. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But yeah, Immutable already covered most of the important bits, Taylor, my goodness. The whole, I'm just gonna real quick skim a Wikipedia article and call it good, that kind of thing.
That's the impression I got.
A very facile, shallow depth of knowledge when you get into the technical bits of it.
Yeah, and
there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know. I'm not a molecular biologist. I don't know all that stuff, but I would
Oh, sure, but I mean,
debate on it.
you don't have to know everything, but if you're going to do a debate on a thing, you might want to at least, look up some things. I don't know. I mean, it's a long way from my specialty, too. It only
Well,
very vaguely touches on astrophysics and cosmology, but
Oh, I mean,
the fact that we found, amino acids and um, nucleobases and all these sorts of things out in freaking space, it makes a pretty strong case that those same things could definitely develop here on Earth, where the environment is
yeah.
a little more friendly.
Well, and it's almost, I mean, it's stronger than that. Like, it's almost certain that they would form, because
Hmm.
you think about, like, for instance, like the core of a comet. Like, in layman terms, right? Like, it's a dirt ball covered in ice. Like,
Yeah.
the only chemistry that's really available to that, outside of water being present, is UV light. So, like, y- as it is, like in early Earth, you would have some scenarios, like you would have some situations where that could happen, but all the same compounds that you would expect in a comet are definitely present on the early Earth.
isn't it odd we see these organic compounds in nature, you know, in space,
Yeah, all
Yeah,
over the
I mean,
amino
place.
it's
acids,
Like we
and you
just
see,
found
building blocks
hydrogen
of life.
cyanide on Enceladus, that moon of Saturn that keeps belching out
Yes.
ice crystals and shit. We found hydrogen cyanide, which is key to the linkages of amino acids and whatnot.
Now,
Like, this stuff is
what
everywhere.
what I was
oh, I
saying
feel like I
yesterday.
should.
Now, if they were to find like some type of primitive life on one of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, that would just absolutely blow them away. That would like what would that? Oh well, God must have created primitive life on the moons of Jupiter, on Io or Ganymede.
Hmm. Yeah, they'd have to change the script again,
Oh
just like
well,
they did when the cosmic microwave background verified the Big Bang Theory.
I feel like I
mean,
should
I
ask you
love.
this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, immutable. No, go ahead.
No,
Sure.
when you mentioned like the moons of like Europa and Io, I forget if it's Europa or if it's Io, but I remember a while, like a few years ago, there were some pretty interesting discussions, like in astrobiological communities, regarding the fact that one of Jupiter's moons, I think it's either Europa or Io, they observed the fact that one of its moons, it has like a very like thick layer of ice, but they were able to
Europa.
deduce that yeah, in this case, like the moon of Europa, like that ice layer seems to only have, like, from what they could tell in the computations they were running, seems to only be about like 100 million years old or something like that, which is indicative of which means that there must be some like climate process
There's
that moon is undergoing to
almost
recycle the ice
certainly.
that's present on it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's also suspected, like, that, maybe not life forms, but that it does have like extreme chemical complexity, because you have oceans of liquid methane. The core of that moon is pretty wild.
Well, we don't know
But
much
so,
about
like,
its interior as yet. There's a lot of
yeah,
supposition, but we still have to send probes over to do some tests.
Yeah, but
yeah.
imagine if they actually found primitive single cellular life that was that it had evolved there. That would, um, yeah,
Yeah, or even pre-cellular life. Like, if as long as it's
Right.
self-replicating molecules, we what else do you
maybe
call that?
polymers. Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah. And there's
Yeah, I
another
mean, that's
contender
a.
in the Jovian system too. Ganymede. It's not
Oh,
like
okay.
a super thick ice crust like Europa, where there's
Callisto is the
probably
oddball out.
oceans underneath, but it does have a really thick ice layer. And the Juno spacecraft found some cool organic molecules earlier this year. It isn't necessarily indicative of biological processes going on, but it's a clue that it might be possible for there to be a functional biosphere or a pre-biosphere going on.
So, I mean, I guess that's a question that, like, maybe astrochemistry has more of a interesting perspective that it can lend compared to, like, normal prebiotic chemistry studies. And that would be, like, would you say that there's, like, some measure of chemical complexity which lends more likelihood to there being life present rather than, like, some complex chemistry, producing certain classes of, biomolecules that we observe in the early Earth or in life in general?
Yeah, like you don't necessarily need a certain degree of complexity. Like, James Tour infamously started screeching about how you need hundreds and hundreds of,
Proteins.
polypeptides in a chain and so forth. You don't necessarily need that. If you want to get complex life like we have, if you want to get complex, even single cellular life like a prokaryote,
Right.
then it doesn't necessarily have to follow the same pathway our evolution did.
Right.
It That's one way we know that would work, but there may be others.
Not the only
It's really
way
hard to say.
possible.
Or we could end up with finding something that is very complex but not cellular. We just don't know.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think in some
We'll get
respects,
sinister in a second.
if you think about life just from the view of thermodynamics, which, granted, the field is still very much developing, the field of non-equilibrium thermodynamics. So this attempt to kind of study thermodynamic processes that do not necessarily achieve an equilibrium, and as such, the initial conditions are harder to determine. Life kind of seems to be the inevitable, or at least one of the inevitable consequences of this kind of process. Why is life so complex, and why does it exist if entropy is a thing? Well, it's because cells have this capability to be able to disorder the environment around them more than their own complexity, in a way. Right?
They're very good at that, yes.
Whatever a lot of biological processes that you observe, granted, some of them do result in a positive, like in a decrease of entropy, but by and large, most processes that life does actually increases the entropy, like, of the total system. So it's not in contradiction with the second law.
No, not at all. I've heard several physicists use the same type of phrasing, that given the circumstances, at least on early Earth, where you've got energy being dumped into the system by the sun, organic processes developing in that energy gradient is basically inevitable because there's more energy than can be expended. So entropic processes make the formation of early life more likely than not as a means of evening out the distribution. We are ourselves the embodiment of entropy, you might say, from that point of view.
Yeah. I think Nick Lane refers to kind of like, not coined the term, but at least has kind of used the phrase entropy, engines of entropy. Or entropic engines, or things like that. We're systems in a way that kind of feed off of entropy as a concept, that kind of feed off of the ability that life can manipulate these entropic gradients. Although, a quick remark that I would say is that I think that's certainly, it's not really debatable that that element needs to be incorporated with abiogenesis. Although, if you look at some of the literature concerning, like, models that are competing with each other, for instance, peptide RNA versus, metabolism coming first and stuff like that, it's very much plausible to have a system where you have peptide and RNA interactions, but not other metabolic processes, or systems where you have this kind of extreme chemical diversity, which is producing, precursors or analogs to metabolic cycles in these kind of like deep sea or alkaline hydrothermal vents, but they're not quite life yet. And so it seems that there's some kind of there's a few missing pieces as to try and understand where these like three major and critical elements of life intersect each other. Like, what is it exactly that, or that drives life to adopt all three of these kind of phenomenons of being, having this nucleic acid system and this metabolism and this also, this what creationists will say, and it's a legitimate point. This kind of the creation of information, if you will, right? This
Let's not use that
creation
term.
of genetic. Well, but it is. The thing is, though, like, it's not entirely wrong, though, right? Like, there is information in biological systems.
Yeah, but
that is
how are they
different from
defining it?
That's
You
a
notice
$1 million
that's how
question.
dodge that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's
You've offended Athena.
And
You can define it in multiple ways.
Athena wants to show everyone her tail.
But yeah, I mean, it's
But it's important
That's
that
the
they're
thing.
not. It's important that they're not changing between definitions. I think they're trying. I think he was trying to use an information theory definition of information, which, if I understand it correctly, is they have something called entropy, where if they get a new result, and I guess if we have like life coming out of. This is what I think they're trying to say. If we have life coming out of these chemicals, that's an unexpected result, and therefore is new information under information theory. But if we're going with informatics, what they're trying to say is we're getting data. They have data.
Yeah.
And quantum mechanics has a different definition yet. So he is right that they shouldn't use it if they're going to use it inconsistently. So yeah. I also have a question. So when you're talking about complexity, were you referring to the runtime complexity or space complexity?
I guess both.
Because the runtime complexity is how quickly something can run, and the space complexity is how much space it takes to run the algorithm.
Oh, okay. I think I'm probably referring to runtime complexity in that case.
And that's usually, it can be in polynomial time or non-polynomial time, and I don't think life has ever been defined as an NP-hard problem.
No.
NPC?
The P versus NP conjecture is very, very interesting, but it's also very complicated.
Well, solving it is, but it's really just a set theory problem.
Yeah.
I feel like y'all have drifted into an adjacent language. Are you speaking Mathish?
Yeah, we are. Well, kind of. I mean, depends where you stand on computer science. I kind of view, like, computer science as being kind of like the next closest thing to math that you get. But I think probably other computer scientists will have differing opinions.
There are computer scientists today that are
Hello,
mathematicians.
P-Town.
Oh, sure. That's not unexpected at all.
And some computer scientists that have become mathematicians, I guess, too, the other vice versa.
Yeah, it's not surprising.
And my foot's getting attacked.
Violence!
Kitty violence. The best kind.
Murder practice.
Yes. Go get me your toy, Athena. But I think it's clear that Grayson and Sal knew what they were talking about on some level, and the rest of us were just like, what is this?
Well, I mean...
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think Taylor was just completely... I don't know where she was.
Out of left field?
Yeah, for sure.
Very, very much so.
And similarly, while Sal talks a big game, he has been called out more than once. Dapper still has a timer running. Things of this nature. He's not quite on base, although he presents himself in that way.
I would agree. Hey, everyone.
Hey, Grayson.
Welcome, Grayson.
How's it going?
Great job in the debate. You guys did really well.
Yeah, I missed the first part of this stream, so everyone talking about how maybe, I don't know. I think that I didn't do the best job in terms of just making the information accessible to like a lay audience. I felt like it was kind of wrapped in a lot of jargon potentially, like that I didn't have the time to define. But you know, if
That's
basically if I had had longer than 6 minutes for my intro, I think I could have done a better job with that specifically. But just with the 6 minutes, I wanted to make my points about, why methodological naturalism is superior and why the uh, you know, common attempted defeaters at abiogenesis fail. And so then squeezing in the remaining time, just like a broad overview of abiogenesis might have just been too much ground to cover to where maybe I was losing part of the audience that was, not able,
it's a
like I was
balancing
speaking
game.
really fast and I was using a lot of technical jargon.
It's
does,
a balancing, but remember, their goal is to not let you explain that. Their goal is to keep it as confusing and just, unapproachable to the audience, so that people get the impression this is, you know,
Wow.
not real or impossible.
To know more than chemistry than I do isn't hard.
Yeah, to that point, James.
Yeah,
Like,
chemistry
kinda like-
is.
But yeah, to that point about yeah, I think it's kind of like Brandolini's law, right? Where like they bring up so many points that you can't adequately respond to all of them.
Oh, the Geshgala.
And the thing that I think is a bit nefarious about that in particular is that Sal is well aware of that and he's brought it up. He's complained about it in his debates. And then when we were discussing the format for this debate, he said that he wants 3 to 5 minutes of uninterrupted time, like during the open dialogue portion, not during the openings. And I
Wanted it
said,
broken up into time segments. Yeah.
yes. Well, no, he wanted the time segments to be 3 to 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes. And I said, my only request is that we just bring up one point at a time before allowing the other side to address that point. And he basically said that I won't be able to bring my best to the table in that format, and you're trying to sabotage me. And like, I'm like, wow.
Oh, that's such a tell. That's such a tell.
Did
He's
anyone
got
see
how many degrees? I mean, he knows the material.
Did anyone see the James Tor versus
Yes.
Professor Dave debate?
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, did Sal remind anyone of James Tor's old man screaming at clouds routine?
He was definitely screaming a lot more than I thought he would. And the funny thing is,
come on now. How much did you scream, Dr. Tour?
He was getting annoyed. He was getting Sal was getting a little annoyed in this debate. You see it sometimes, but he was getting a little annoyed at times.
I definitely bring that out of him, I think. Because like I pointed out the fact that he's making all of these extremely strong and definitive statements about papers that I know that he has not read. Because I asked him before the debate started, have you ever heard of amyloid world hypothesis? And he said no.
I've never heard of it before tonight.
Well, I used to see streams where it'd be Sal, Otangelo, and John Maddox just not reading papers, just like doing Control F, just looking for like little phrases that they can copy and paste out of a paper, not reading the paper, just to take it out of context because they think it supports them. And quote mining, it's one of their tried and true tactics that they do. They cite papers that don't agree with them.
Well, if you can't read the papers, it's very easy to do that.
And I tried to bring that up. Like, I tried to call Sal out for doing that. I don't know if you guys thought that I was effective in doing that, or I could have made that case stronger.
None of these people say that abiogenesis is impossible. Like, they might go with one model over another. They might see problems with the current theories or models, but none of them think it's impossible.
Did you notice that they kept trying to insist that abiogenesis was a theory?
Yeah.
They did that. Taylor was trying to conflate that between
like-
theory and hypothesis.
Was Taylor the one that was trying to explain the P versus NP problem to me because she thought I had a question about it? Instead of me just telling her, it's like, I don't think you know what it is, so I'm going to explain it to you. Or was that someone else? I seem to remember Sal being in on that one. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
What?
Where did Amy go?
I don't know. I mean, I know at least.
Amy is watching from afar. She has a bad headache. I think
As will happen when
maybe-
you have to deal with Sal and Taylor.
Well, I
I
was
was
going
just
to
about
say
to say
probably
that.
pounding her head into the table.
Yeah,
A few times, you know.
That's true.
Listen,
Sal especially, because
I'm sure-
I mean, I think Sal is clever, but I mean,
I'm sure Sal's girlfriend has had a headache for the last 6 months.
Ooh.
Well, she doesn't exist.
Ooh.
So.
Yeah,
This is
but I,
I'm
and
sure
to
it's
the
his
point,
girlfriend.
I don't think anybody can say with a straight face that abiogenesis is impossible because we exist. Like, even if you want to say God magic finger poofed it, something frickin' happened, you know?
They just want to say that that's not
It
abiogenesis. if
has
a
to be
god did it.
supernatural. It has to be supernatural.
I think
You should.
I think a more sophisticated point that they could argue, and here's a point for creationists to argue if they wanted to, is that you can't argue either that abiogenesis is a high probability nor a low probability event.
Well, they're never going to argue that because their main argument
And
is
the
that
reason I
it's
say that is
statistically
because
impossible.
Go ahead.
yeah, that's just it's incoherent because the notion of impossibility they're using just doesn't make sense. Like, if it's impossible, it wouldn't occur, but it does occur, so it's not impossible.
I'm pretty sure the probability of abiogenesis happening on this planet at some point in our past is 1.
I wouldn't say that. I think it's not calculable.
No, I'm pretty sure it's 1.
I don't
Unless,
think you're
like,
accounting
that's
for
seeded from
panspermia.
somewhere else.
Well,
yeah, that's what I was
I
going
mean-
to say. But
We could be aliens.
In that case, amend the statement to the prior probability.
Well,
It
let's
had
just say the
happened
probability of
somewhere.
abiogenesis happening is 1.
Right, then in that case, just replace probability with prior probability.
I don't know. I maybe could think of some scenarios where abiogenesis never happened, but we still live here. But it'd be a stretch. I definitely think abiogenesis
Yeah, that's
is more likely than not.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
this is the point we're kind of arguing about how this kind of idea of, like, in systems that do not attain thermodynamic equilibrium, you have this kind of tendency for complexity to just grow and grow and grow without bound, really. Although that doesn't seem to be like a sufficient explanation as for why the particular ensemble that life has, this kind of merging of self-organization along with information in the form of nucleotides and nucleobases, and this additional feature of metabolism are all present, when it seems that if you consider prebiotic models like RNA peptide world or lipid world and stuff like that, these are all systems that have a lot of moving parts and all tend to increase the entropy of the system, but are not life, at least not life that we would recognize. And so it seems that something further is needed to kind of explain why life forms.
Well, even the way they define it.
Taking it to P-Town out there. Yeah, he is. He's not even really trying. He's just making baseless assertions out there.
And that certainly wasn't a snarky
Surprise,
comment.
surprise.
Oh, we got the Dr. Dino.
Hey.
Even the way they define it, if they want to insist God is not living,
Aloha.
that's still God just did abiogenesis.
Hey, Grayson, I thought you were heading to bed.
Oh, I
Well,
never said that.
The point that kind of
fair,
ticks
fair, fair.
creationists off,
Did we just lose someone?
I mean, a point that will piss creationists off
No.
is that abiogenesis has to be accounted for in the theist worldview and also in the atheist worldview, because theists certainly believe that there was at one point in time a state
you
where
know, what are
life
we
did not
doing?
exist and then did come into existence by means of God doing whatever God did. But you have to explain how exactly God did that for it to be a scientific explanation.
I know. He spoke it into existence. He said the words, and it just came. The universe obeyed the word of God, like we need to obey the word of God. You see, the universe is based on the word of God, obeying the word of God.
God wrote the entire universe in white space.
Yeah, that should clear it up for you. He spoke it into existence. These are like kind of pithy things they say to each other when they're doing their like Bible study circle jerks, where they, oh yeah, that makes sense. Really tells you absolutely nothing about anything, but to them, it really does sound. They love it. They eat that stuff up.
Well, religion was initially just a way to explaining things we didn't have better explanations for.
And then we did get the
That's a
better
part of it, yeah.
explanations, and they resist those. They work against those. Yeah.
Well, I'm not an anthropologist, so nor an organic
Boy.
chemist.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different. No, I mean, I studied chemistry like as a major, but yeah, chemistry is hard. People do it better than I do, so I let them do it. I'm more interested in the theory stuff than I am in like getting my hands dirty and potentially killing myself with chemicals.
Yeah, fair.
We got another guest backstage. Dr. Dino, are you with us? Did you want to make a? Do you have anything to add before we get him in?
I mean, fun debate mostly. It's nice seeing Grayson and Amy on screen, but Sal did his same old thing, and Taylor continued to surprise me that she's a bio major.
She's apparently working towards a PhD in cellular biology.
That's what I've heard, which
Boy, that's
interesting.
What, at Liberty University? Biola?
I think it's
No, wait. No,
actually
Sal is the
accredited
one that was just accepted
Okay.
into a PhD program at Liberty University.
How the hell did she get that far as a biologist if she doesn't believe in evolution?
Well, I guess she belongs to like the 0.02%, or is that too high? It's a really low number of evolutionary at least biologists who don't believe in it.
Yeah, mathematicians of the scientists who believe in God, mathematicians are the most likely to do it.
Well, I thought it was engineers, or is there just a lot of overlap?
That's just T-Rock.
Yeah. Our university categorizes mathematics as a science. I'm not sure I agree with that.
I would not categorize mathematics as science.
It's a pure science, it's not what most people consider a science, but it falls under the academic definition.
But like science is inductive, like math is deductive.
You've never done a proof by induction?
That's not science though. That's math or logic.
Well, that's annoying is what it is.
Yeah.
Why not both?
Science, I mean, math usually falls on like deductive or inductive argumentation. But like science usually is based on reasoning, which is fine. It works, but
Athena, go get your toy. Stop attacking my feet.
I'm dying to know who's backstage.
P-Town. You're familiar with
oh boy.
P-Town.
Get ready to hear some things that only creationists can think of.
Yeah, I've missed my good buddy P-Town.
I'll let it be.
Atheist.
Merry Christmas.
I didn't catch it. I didn't catch the debate.
Yo Saturnalia.
Oh,
Joyous
P-Town, you
Festivus.
missed it. We proved abiogenesis. You missed it.
You can't prove a fairy
I know,
tale.
must have missed.
I agree.
What do you mean by fairy tale?
It's not real. Immutable.
God created
Sorry
the-
to break it to you. It's impossible.
Okay, I mean, how do you know?
Okay. Do you
Well,
have a
that would
source
be-
for that?
That would be my position.
Well,
Well,
Uh,
think about the history of science,
It
though,
was-
guys.
I mean, I
Let's
could
go-
believe that a meteorite is. I could believe the meteorite is crashing to the ground. Do you believe me, or is that just?
Let's look at the history of science. Let's take a step back. And scientists
What
used to
about
think
it?
things were really tiny, and then they get more complex. The idea of a simple cell was disproven. And everyone went, oh, God must exist, right? Isn't that how it happened? I'm
What do you
summarizing
mean
here.
Hold on.
Like,
Think about it, though.
Uh,
Let's talk
some
about this
cells are more
imaginary.
There's
simple.
a question I
Let's
want.
think about
Andy
this
Creationist to
imaginary
answer
little
first.
cell that
I-
randomly was self-replicating.
No, Keaton,
Who's
I
the
want you to answer-
biologist on the panel?
I want you to answer this
I mean, I'm a
question.
paleontologist.
How are we measuring
I-
complexity? I have never heard any
So-
creation measure into that.
You
I'm
have a lot of
confused. What
little
period of
parts inside a
science,
cell
like, or
that
scientific thought you're
requires.
referring to.
Hey, Immutable, you seem to have like a delay or something. I'm not sure.
So is the
Let me
runtime
refresh.
complexity of a cell n squared? 2 to the n?
Just look through a microscope and you see little tiny blobs on whatever you're looking at, little cells. And
That's
they're
okay.
little.
You
they're
don't know what I'm talking about. That's fine.
I don't. There's a lot of little tiny little blobs within the blob that all have different parts that are required for that cell to operate. And you want to believe, because you like to believe in fairy tales, that all of those little blobs within the blob can spontaneously come about
No.
Okay.
and within that
that-
self-replicate.
no.
That's a
you're
fairy
telling
tale.
Okay.
What you're telling
No.
me-
No. That's-
This is what you believe,
That's
guys.
not true. No,
Okay,
it isn't
Ken.
actually.
So, immutable. what you
Telling
have
people
just-
what they
Alright,
believe and
immutable.
getting it wrong. Like, holy
Oh.
crap, man.
Keaton,
Well,
what you
hey,
just
I know
told
it
me-
bothers atheists when you tell them what they believe.
Yeah.
I know it's one of the
What
triggers.
you just told all of us is
Some
that
grade
you have
level
no
science
quanti-
fiction right there.
I mean,
So that was my way of apologizing.
you believe
I
that
can
God
be
has a
little
mother,
rough. I
so
don't.
let's exchange idiotic beliefs.
What you've just told us
Yes,
is
God had a mother. Yes.
You have no way of quantifying how complex a cell is. So we have no way of knowing whether a cell is more complex than, say, the popcorn Ember appears to be eating.
It's
I
my,
just talked. I just
toothpick, actually.
described. It's a blob within blob.
So
With blobs
yes,
within
you just told
blobs.
us
Very
you don't have
precise,
a way of
very
That was my
scientific.
definition of complexity.
you have
yes.
no way you have no way of quantifying it. Good to know.
I just said they're blobs within the blobs. That's a
You know what
Do you not know
quantifier.
what
Quantify means-
quantify means?
I was just simplifying it. There are little things that make up the thing, and those little things are required for that thing to exist.
There are little things that
No.
make up crystals. What is your point?
My point is
You know
that
what
you
quantify means.
you can clearly deduce that these things couldn't have happened on accident.
That's
By
not what we're
chance.
asking. What we're asking is, do you know what quantify means?
That's not a deductive argument.
Is anyone going to talk about my blobs within the blob?
Yeah,
Or
I
are we
would
Until
gonna-
you
love
know,
to.
not until you tell me what quantify
No.
means.
I've been putting clips together, and I have one of Flatzoid saying, I love balls. I haven't put that on my list of clips yet. That would have been almost perfect. But I can give you this one.
That turn the friggin' frogs gay.
As close as I can do.
Nice.
Yeah, so it sounds like
Love
P-Town
it.
doesn't want to answer the question about what quantify means, but
I mean,
to address it,
I'm assuming it means to count, right? To number. Is that
Okay,
an okay
good.
definition for you?
Well,
so blobs within blobs does not answer her question about can you quantify complexity, right? You just said blobs within
I
blobs.
did. So what I'm saying is there are a number which is quantifying, a number of the blobs within the blob, within the cell. There are parts which is
the number
quantifying.
of
There's a
parts.
Beware of the
quantitative
blob.
number.
So
Yeah.
wait.
And what I'm saying is each one of these things that we're
so
quantifying are required. You take out one of those things out of the cell, which one of those things
So,
that we're
okay.
quantitating, and then now it doesn't work.
Obviously,
Are
there is
you-
no compelling evidence
Okay.
for this claim, and therefore
And that
Christians
means
should
it's come-
utterly reject it.
By this way, I just I
No,
just
you
defined complexity of the way that I'm using it.
Okay, P-Town, let me just address what you're just saying really
Yeah.
quick, okay? Because I brought up multiple times in the debate where we have
And I apologize
literally,
for
and
missing
P-Town,
it.
come on, man. I brought up multiple times in this debate where I showed where irreducibly complex systems have been showed to naturally arise through like evolution, selection, like multiple different mechanisms. But we have seen irreducibly complex systems evolve before naturalistically. And nobody is saying that these blobs within blobs within blobs just spontaneously arose by accident. That's a complete straw man.
I didn't see the debate, Grayson, but what you're referring to probably, and this is my guess, is yes, we have seen other mechanisms. We have not seen them evolve, by the way, but we have seen. What are you referring to then? Since I missed the debate, go ahead.
Yes, we have the Lenski.
So specifically, what I was referring to was like two things. One, in which we looked at a very, very simple system, a self-replicating RNA that we watched in real time go through Darwinian evolution through multiple generations of this self-replicating RNA. It became 5 different kinds of RNA that were irreducibly complex. If you took just one of them out, they none of them could replicate anymore, but all 5 of them were codependent on each other to form a replicating network. That's an irreducibly complex system that we watched arise from evolution. But there's another example.
So if you're referring to RNA and not DNA, then I'm assuming you're referring to viruses. I'm just trying to clarify, Grayson.
No, everything uses RNA.
Yeah,
No?
RNA isn't. Yes, but here, this was
all
not
biological life uses RNA. Yes,
this was not like a specific organism. Like they created a RNA that was self-replicating just for their example for the lab. Okay, that this undergoes Darwinian evolution. If you want an example in real life with real organisms, then like with a virus that you want, like you can look at the SIV virus that we watched evolve an irreducibly complex 4-component system to bind with human tethering. So we've seen it in real life. We've seen it in a lab.
Okay, yeah, I will. I'll have to. I'll have to defer to. I don't know. Plus, I really, it's hard for me to even imagine how that's even related to anything. Some sort of synthetic RNA that can self-replicate. I don't see how you can call that life. I don't even know what that would be, quite frankly.
Just for the record, I never did call it life. I was using it to illustrate the principle that you can have naturalistic mechanisms that give rise to irreducibly complex systems, and that is.
But how would a strand of RNA be irreducibly complex?
Bro, I literally just got done telling you the whole thing. Like I said, they started with a single RNA variety that was not irreducibly complex. Then it went through evolution that was recorded in the lab over like 200 successive generations of self-replication. And at the end of it, they have 5 different kinds of RNA that evolved. And those 5 formed an irreducibly complex replicating network where if you remove just one of those, then the whole thing fails.
Grayson, I know you mean well, but his firewall of ignorance is too strong.
Okay, I'm trying to see your. I think I get your point, Grayson. I'll have to look into that. Now I'm following your logic. Okay, I'll have to look into that.
Oh, whose kid is in the background?
Sorry, that's mine. I'll mute.
Oh, it was cute. But...
All right, I'll take this opportunity for a break. Leo wants in, and I love all you folks, but I gotta dip out. I gotta get to bed because I'm picking up the kids in the morning. So it's been fun chatting. And toodles.
Good night,
Happy Festivus
Fun.
other assorted holidays.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
Thank you.
Merry Saturnalia.
There we go.
The Saturnalia is over. We're going into the Feast of Sol Invictus tomorrow.
I just realized I was muted. I was going to say Happy Heathen Day, but oh well.
I celebrate none of these things.
Fun.
I was celebrating playing Baldur's Gate 3.
Nice.
I'm kind of curious, like, what
In
P-Town takes irreducible
biocivilization,
complexity to
36.
mean.
Molly, I'll just be interested if you can tell me how many times more complex a cell is than, say, I don't know, my smartwatch.
Well, how many blobs are in those blobs in your smartwatch?
How are we defining a blob?
Well, I mean, my logic or my explanation for what irreducible complexity would be, I think, is
We
kind of
didn't
quite
ask what
simple.
irreducible complexity was. We asked how you're measuring
No,
complexity.
immutable
No, I did.
good.
No, I did.
Okay, you
No,
did.
I did.
but
I
I'm
asked
asking how it's
what
measuring.
it takes irreducible complexity to mean.
And how are you measuring complexity? Is it the number of blobs in something?
In this case, I was, yes. So
what's a blob?
whatever would be those things in cells. I mean, I'm not a
Oh,
biologist. I haven't taken
What
biology
things are
since
You don't
college.
even know
organelles?
what constitutes a cell, and you're making
So-
statements about biology being false. This is ridiculous.
Trying
So,
to keep it simple, Leo.
but I mean, in that case,
I-
though, but so in that case, though, like, are you familiar with what prokaryotic life is?
are the prokaryotes the single cell, right? Organisms, so the single cells.
Well,
Right.
all of them are
So
single
prokaryote-
Or
Right. So prokaryotes don't have. So prokaryotes,
And
by
you-
and large, are organelle free. They don't have like as much complexity as they do. Like, they don't have a nucleus. They don't have mitochondria. They have enzymes already that do that for them. So would you deduce that prokaryotes are
ribosome?
demonstrably less complex than they do have ribosomes, protein complexes? But my question would be,
as far
like,
as we know,
does
I
the
would
lack of
say yeah, they would
organelles-
be. Just to quickly
My
say,
question
yeah, I
is,
would
like,
say
do you
that
consider them
they
to
would be less complex.
Okay,
I would
but
say
mean,
yeah, for the sake of I would say yeah, they're less complex than other organisms. Yes.
In virtue of what?
Okay, but in that case, though, like, why is it, like, why is the criteria you're using of that being like an organism having like intracellular like vesicles making it more complex, like, by nature?
I was trying to defer your point actually, but why would I just because there's more mechanisms involved, so
more
therefore
mechanisms doesn't seem.
I would
Well,
make it
I mean,
more. I would consider it more complex just for the sake
more
of
mechanisms
conversation.
doesn't necessarily mean more complex.
Sure, but for what I'm using
I
it
mean,
for right now, I would say that would be more complex.
Athena, stop doing what you're doing.
But when I look at it, I see
by and large,
it,
right? Like, the majority of mechanisms that occur between prokaryotes and eukaryotes are the same, right? There's a few things that vary, that being different things that, like, eukaryotes do that are managed by, like, mitochondria or things like that. But prokaryotes don't need to, because they have that already built into the genome. But I don't know if I would consider that a level of complexity, just like a measure of like how organisms adapt to, like, and manage, their own like cell cycle effectively.
And there are
I think
there are single-celled eukaryotic organisms as well. Just so you're aware.
Okay,
Yeah,
my biology is not that good. So
A eukaryote has a nucleus.
Interesting.
A prokaryote
Well,
But it's
doesn't.
false, right? You know it's false, but you don't understand the subject. But it's false. It's all wrong. All that stuff's wrong. All the scientists that
well,
know
you can
infinitely
just
more than
appeal
me
to
are all
authority
wrong.
all day, and that's all you're gonna have.
I don't know
Leo.
what you mean by appeal to authority. Nobody's appealed
Look,
to an
so
authority.
let me
Well,
just
my-
quickly
Well-
just describe what I mean by irreducible complexity. And you can look at just the human
Sure.
body, for example.
Okay.
Like I just had a baby. What came first, the milk or the boobs?
Okay.
Like what came first, chicken or the egg? Right. I mean, so
The egg,
or
basically.
if you have
I mean,
that or the
are you
heart and the
familiar at
lungs,
all with-
right? What I'm saying is each thing kind of needs to work in order for the whole mechanism.
So
to work
are you
each part,
familiar
right?
at
So
all with
that's the
embryological
definition of irreducible.
development? So, I mean, it surprises me you raised that example. Like, have you looked into like embryological development at all, to like actually understand like the stages?
Briefly,
and
you're
processes by
referring to the
which,
different stages of
like, a
how a
human
baby
embryo
develops.
or like
Mhm. I've looked
Right,
into it.
because you're aware like that when a person
It's-
initially develops like at a one cell stage, right? That
Great.
one cell doesn't have all the information of a brain, of a heart, of a liver, of a kidney, and that over time, right, as it divides and as it gets different signals from like from its mother, right, these cells differentiate naturally and end up creating these different organs and these different like super complicated things that are required to make a person at the end of this 9-month cycle, right?
Yeah, the
Like the
blueprints
point
are
being, you're saying
in
like
the
that all these things are
genome.
codependent on each other, but you're aware of the fact that it comes from one cell. Okay, but
Right, but
this,
but for
you're
you to
saying
extrapolate
like
and
these
say
things all need to be
therefore
codependent and
for
coexisting
you
with each
to
other.
Let
for
me
you to
tell-
take for you to I don't want to say this without sounding accusatory, but for you to take this process that God made where, the blueprints are there in the genome, and then a baby from conception to birth and then growing into a human is the same, and take this and extrapolate and say this is the way that we evolved, I think is silly.
Can we
For you
Well,
to
that's
take
just an
that
argument from
assumption,
incredulity.
Well,
That's
I'm
just
not.
for
saying
you to
that
take
because
that
I
as an
don't
I'm not
assumption
saying
is
that.
a jump.
Let me
Okay,
clarify.
Actually, maybe Doc Dino should answer this
Well,
one
let
because
me ask 2 questions then in that case, right?
Well,
One,
here, and let me just clarify.
well,
I think the evidence
just
for
real
it,
quick,
because
like,
I have. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can we let Drace in? He's backstage.
Yeah, we should do that.
so one, yeah, you can let Trace in. The first thing I would ask is like, do you think that God is monkeying with the physics somehow of like the development of males and or specifically humans? Would be the first question.
Sorry, it cut out for a
Or do you
second in
think
your
that
voice.
just like that this is
So
something
is
like
God
that human
monkeying around
genomes are
with?
capable of doing on their own,
Is God?
like containing the sufficient information to create a human?
It cut out for a second, but so I don't want to make sure I didn't miss any of your question. But I think that God made us in His image, and we and he hasn't messed with the genome. I mean, humans have changed over the last 6,000 years as a species. Yeah,
I mean, I don't take any objection to like the point of like God creating man in His image, but the thing I'm like trying to raise is like you can do this.
I'm just trying to figure out your
embryos,
question.
Like, you can have. My question is like even if God was developed in the initial stages of like God creating humans, right, in this stage of like irreducible complexity, it seems like that from our scientific understanding of things, right, that life finds a way. Like life has different mechanisms it uses to adapt and to form like more complex things like humans and other types of animals that exist. And so
I agree.
I don't know how exactly you would differentiate.
It's
like
it's quite similar to what we just.
Here is to say,
Athena.
I don't know if there's a delay, but like my end point is to say I don't know how exactly you would differentiate between a god having created things and monkeying with the physics, so to speak, versus just natural processes giving rise to more complex systems by evolutionary means.
Well, I think it comes down to. I mean, we both can agree that adaptation happens. But again, it's just taking that and extrapolating that to a whole nother thing, which we can't actually observe and haven't observed is where I draw the line. But I understand from an atheist perspective that it's a necessary component. But it should be noted that it is an assumption.
I would push back on that. I would push back on that, and to the point of the history of science, right? The whole reason we have evolution is in part due to Carolus Linnaeus, right? This whole process of trying to characterize life based upon its organisms, and that this natural branching pattern that's produced by evolution is also, it was something noted first by a creationist, right? And in fact, like, this kind of question is a modern project for creationists, and it's an important one. But it's what are the, if you want to refer to things like kinds, or like say that speciation only goes to a certain point, you need to have characteristics like that will tell you like how to differentiate between those things. And
Yeah.
for people like that study like different kinds of like organismal architecture and life that's present like within the fossil record, for instance, you can't do it on the basis of morphology. But the other important thing too is that when you look at genomics, right, you get one kind of phylogeny that's predicted by, for instance, on the basis of morphology, and another that's based on genetic similarity. They both agree with each other. So it's fine to like try to reject that point, but you need to kind of reconcile why exactly you can have two different bases for like trying to compare organisms, and they both produce the same pattern.
Well, I would just check to see if it matches the biblical model. And so far, I haven't seen a contradiction.
Is God made out of blobs?
And in this immutable, so it would simply be there is a way, and that would be if they can make babies together, then they would be the same kind. That's the way the Bible describes it.
Okay,
Leo brings up a really good point right here.
is
Leo brings up a really good point right here that I want to hear from P-Town on. P-Town, how many blobs within blobs is God? Is he just one blob? In which case, he would be less complex than us.
Maybe he's just blobness itself.
Maybe. I mean, the thing is though, like P-Town, it's interesting. Like, but the definition you propose is actually the common definition that's referred to by the notion of species.
Blob. They're not species.
So it sounds like probably the actual evidence isn't contradicting what the Bible says.
So the thing that's like contradicting it, right, or that's causing issues, particularly with creationists and their understanding and reading framework of the Bible, is that they're wanting to say that there's limits to how far and what kinds of change can occur. But neither the fossil record nor genetics seems to indicate such a thing.
So, can I? I'm sorry. I just wanted to say it looks like Bumblebee is in the room looking to get in. Somebody just did that for me, so I'd feel bad not doing it for Bumblebee. But if somebody's willing to let Bumblebee in.
So, because my smartwatch, according to your definition, has 0 blobs, it's not complex while a cell is. Is that correct, P-Town?
Sister, can you ask that again? I'm sorry.
Because my smartwatch, by what I'm following your definition, has 0 blobs, because you've never defined what a blob is. I'm thinking it's like an object-oriented thing, personally.
I was just trying to keep my argument simple. You know, I mean, I can't remember all the different parts of a cell.
There's a difference between simplicity and vagueness.
Keeping it simple is good.
I was painting it in from a historical context, guys.
Keeping it simple is good, but it also has to make sense. And so far, what you're saying just doesn't connect to anything. Like when we ask you how do you quantify complexity, we're asking you how do you measure it, meaning you have to be able some unit of measurement that you can put numbers on.
Is that measurement blobs?
I did though. I said blobs. So here, what I was trying to say is, if you look at it from a history of science,
how do we define that unit?
From the history of the science, the atheist would argue back in the day that the smaller it gets simpler, and that's not that's my argument, Leo. I'm trying to explain where the blob argument came about, because it was my argument.
In the blob argument.
The history of it isn't. It's important to look at the trajectory of science. Thereby, anytime looking at the past, so you can see where you're going.
Define what a blob is. So if we can measure blobs,
I was referring to the different mechanisms within what you would call a simple cell. Remember those textbooks, the simple cell?
Well, first of all, mechanisms are not the same thing as organelles. There are
mechanisms in action cells
that are based on chemistry that have nothing to do. Well, Dr. Diane would know about that I do, but aren't necessarily relying on organelles.
Well, I mean,
Fine, but they
may
look
I
like
try to bridge a
blobs
gap
within
here?
the blob. When you look through a microscope,
Rhino answer
they
here
look
so
like
you can
blobs
correct me.
within blobs,
Let
and
them
they all play a role, and
Are there
each
such
one is
things
and each
as like
and each one
kiloblobs,
is important for that
gigablobs,
blob to work.
like
And this is
kiloblobs? Like,
and this is a way to quantify complexity.
Yeah, but how? Like,
just
what is
said
the
it.
quantity that a blob is associated
How
with?
many necessary components are required for the overall thing to work and stay alive? That's quantifying complexity in this case.
Let's.
I mean, how is this
Let me
complicated?
ask.
Yes.
Well,
I think I made it as simple as possible.
I understand.
Oh, okay.
Well, I understand what you're trying to get at, but like, let me attack this from a different kind of angle, right? It could be
From
like
within the
you observe a
blob.
certain number of blobs in a cell, right? And that you say, oh yeah, well this is the number it needs for, this is the amount of blobs it needs for this thing to function as a creature, right? But
well,
it
the
could
point is
be
they
that-
need all of them. You know, each
Well,
creature. I mean,
except for one point. Okay, but like here's an important point though, right? The important point is that what you like circumstances throughout, like how that organism and its offspring and generations develop, right, may make it the case that it needs fewer of those parts over time to do the thing that it does now, right? A key example of
but
that,
that would be going the other direction, though. That would be
no,
that would be the opposite of what evolutionists argue. Well, I'm just saying it broadly speaking, but I understand the point would be similar.
You have that reversed.
I don't understand.
Okay, maybe I missed something.
How that argument connects, because
can we get Bree in here?
So the
I don't know if James is here.
Like, I can give you an example of such a thing occurring, for instance.
Well, I could just give it to you. It's
I-
fine. I can give you that point. I can assume, or what's the word for just
concede?
Say okay. Grant, thank you. Thanks.
Well, but so here's one of the interesting points, like and how it connects, right? If you have an organism that no longer needs one of its parts to fully function, right? The corresponding part of the genome that thing was encoded by now can mutate freely, right? And perhaps adopt some new function over time, right? That's one of the things, right? In fact,
I've heard about this. I've heard about this idea, but
over time.
Regardless, I already illustrated how these so-called irreducibly complex systems can come about from natural mechanisms. So this whole
first of all, your RNA wasn't natural, and I don't think it's a good.
This whole
it is.
idea about irreducible complexity is unfounded, because we know that irreducibly complex systems, according to Behe, can evolve.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Can I really quick say, Grayson, back when Professor Dave was preparing to debate tour, I sent him this decent sized bibliography of a shit ton of different abio articles, and I was wondering if I could email you the bibliography, just so just to be useful. Okay.
Yeah, my email is in my channel about page.
Oh yeah, I still have the same ping.
It's just criticalbasedinquiry@gmail.com.
Yeah, and if you can define what a blob is, please email Stephen Wolfram so we can get further work on complexity science done.
Yes. Actually, on that note, so P-Town?
Yeah.
Okay. If 2x equals 4, what is x?
It would be 2. Right? That's what
Okay.
you're looking for?
Now,
ask him to take a derivative.
Wait. If 2 blob equals 2 blob, what is a blob? Can you please give a definition? Just like an example.
Guys, we're really the whole
not
point
an
of
example,
why I
just
said
the definition.
blob was to keep it
Because you
simple.
said
I already
it's
acknowledge I
how
don't know the
you
different
measure-
parts off the top of my head
You said
when it
you
comes to
used
cells,
to
but you
measure
guys just want to
complexity.
You guys, we had Immutable and I had a really good
He's just
conversation going. You
referring
guys
to-
are going to derail it.
Blob sounds really silly, but you're the one that said
Look,
it, and
he-
you
he's just talking about
confidently
organelles.
So wait, so
that it's
I
wait a
already-
second.
I
So
already
blob is equal
granted you
to
that it sounds
Look.
silly, but it's just not productive.
So
It's
blob
literally
is equal
just
to X.
organelles.
It's
Guys,
whatever.
I can
Guys.
explain.
Is that
It's
right?
just organelles. That's all he was talking about.
Yeah, and I was just trying to frame it and
He's
from a
referring
point of
to
view,
organelles
from
in
a
a cell.
historical point of view. Before they named them, they saw blobs in a microscope. That's all my point.
So you just
Anyway.
mean organelles. Why not just say organelles then?
Because he didn't remember the term
mean,
organelles on
like,
the spot.
I think.
Gee, I wonder why.
But if you're going to say
Yeah, I mean, like,
biological life is more
it's a
complex than
decent point to
human-made
try
things,
and make.
if you're going to say biological life is more complex than human-made things, you need some way of measuring complexity, not just the
Assembly
number of
theory.
things. Isn't assembly theory a pseudoscience itself? I need to look that one up.
Well, it's
You guys see my
published
new
and peer
baby?
reviewed.
Here's my new little blob
not
right
from
here.
what I've seen, but I mean,
I mean,
fantastic.
like, Sinister, what you're
Glad to
describing
see it.
is
Very cute.
exactly what assembly theory sets out to do.
I don't know
Like,
shit about
it's
assembly theory.
newer, it's not consensus, but like, it is published in a peer-reviewed journal and makes a somewhat admirable attempt at doing exactly what you're asking in terms of quantifying complexity. There are other theories of complexity that also try to do this. I think like what Kondrashov complexity is another attempt. There's computational complexity.
Well, computational complexity has been well established for a long time.
Yeah. I'm just saying that there are ways that people have attempted at quantifying complexity. They all have their certain issues. It's still like a frontier of science right now to quantify complexity reliably. So
I think
I
the
mean, I think a
Behe
lot of
with
it too
the
is like,
The baby was cute. So what was the bad about that about logic?
Immutable has a delay, so it
I
kind of
think he
makes
said
things
Behe,
awkward.
but I could be mistaken.
I was going to say Behe.
Oh.
You know, Grayson brought up Behe. I think the flagellum motor is actually just a good example for irreducible complexity. I think that playing
we
devil's
have more
advocate.
simple
I would ask
flagellum
in that
motors.
case.
So exactly. So you know, to play devil's advocate, the evolutionists will say, "Oh, well, we found you know, other parts to the motor in other organisms, and therefore that's evidence that it can't be irreducibly complex because, you know." But at the same time, it's still irreducibly complex.
Well, that's
hold
just
on.
moving the
Actually, that's
So
not
it's like the assumption is still there
wait,
just
wait,
because.
This is why.
Follow me. I mean, yeah, go.
But what you're
Well,
talking
wait.
about
This is why. This is why I asked about. Okay.
what he's
This
talking
is
about was
exactly
actually
why I asked you about what you construe irreducible complexity to mean.
because what
It
you're
would.
Go ahead.
what you're talking about was actually disproven in a court of law in Kitzmiller versus Dover, because it did have a
No.
function before it became the flagellar motor you're trying to talk about. It was for excreting systems from the more primitive cell, if I recall correctly.
Atheists want to say that it was disproven, but that's not what happened in the trial. But the point,
Well,
the point is I was just playing devil's advocate where
that was brought up.
I
in
mean,
the trial.
we're already getting into it, Sinister, with Doc saying that we've discovered other things out there with similar mechanisms, and when you put those mechanisms together, then you can, you know, you can, if you take parts from the other mechanisms that we discovered, you can actually create a flagellum, but it still doesn't change the argument that the flagellum itself is irreducibly complex.
yes, it does.
And how? It's still
Well, it does
Well,
actually.
it's still the assumption that these
The
parts
reason-
fell together.
So-
It doesn't make sense to me.
Hold on. I think you should listen to Doc Dino for a bit and let him
Well,
explain.
Well,
Just so, P-Town, if you find a motorcycle and then you find a bicycle, like a motorcycle is more complex than a bicycle, right?
Yes. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So I'm
And
following your
thus
logic.
the motorcycle can be reduced in complexity and still form a function as shown by a bicycle.
So let me just clarify when it comes to these other parts, these other mechanisms that create the flagellum, were they parts within a larger mechanism,
Yes.
or were they actually just single parts? Is my question making sense?
They had
Doc?
another function that was not the same exact function that they fulfill in a flagellum. It's like
That's my point. So that
No,
wouldn't be small. It wouldn't be like a motorcycle, and then we see a motorcycle, and then we found a bicycle.
the point that you're
It
missing.
wouldn't be.
here,
It would be
Pete,
like a motorcycle, and then we found a car, and then we see the two parts have similar parts.
So P-Town, the part that you're missing here is that like these parts can be co-opted to serve different and new functions. That's why it's not irreducibly complex.
But we don't
because the
see it.
What?
We don't
We
see
do,
it. We
actually.
don't see that
Yeah, we
happen.
So the thing is, P-Town.
We don't see things
We do.
evolve to do that.
So
When?
P-Town,
Maybe you don't.
we do actually. The thing is, like, that's the whole purpose of the flagellum thing, right? The reason it's brought up as to why you have proteins that are like that have synonymous like shape to the flagellum but don't have the same function is because you can add small little things to the structure of a protein that weren't in the original, and it changes the entire function of the thing, like the flagellum in this case. And you see this happen all the time. Like a prime example is the example with a CIT plus evolution in the Linsky experiment. And the reason is, like, there are several changes documented in the research that meet the exact criteria of irreducible complexity. There's conditions needed for that kind of gene to be activated. And individually, right, if any of the three changes that were noted were not present originally, it would not function. But in the populations they observed, it did happen, and we know exactly how it happened. And it shows exactly how
I
you
mean, even
can
in
have, the modification of the simple system.
If anyone's interested,
No,
I
I'm just
put a
saying,
link-
like, that just shows the point of how you can modify a simple system to be like more complex in the case of like citrate metabolism.
If anyone is interested, I put a link to something about assembly theory from Nature in the private chat if you want to take a look at it.
I'll say, if I may, exaptation is a known mechanism in evolution. We can see there are many exapted, which is what you're talking about, traits. Like, we can see fossil whales that didn't seem to use their tails for swimming. Then we see later whales that did. Like, a trait can be co-opted for a new purpose. It happens all the time.
I don't think we want to go down this route until we start, because we'll eventually start talking about 15-foot whale penises.
Just a quick listen, Immutable. I understand.
Too, like, the more simple example.
Hold up.
Can you bring me in?
I want to put this out there really quick. There's this other paper that I read recently. It's called Evolutionary Resurrection of Flagellar Motility. And this is like basically about, it's like co-option basically, where they have this this colony that doesn't have this particular promoter, so they don't have their flagella, but then elements of their elements of nitrogen fixation, parts of the metabolism there, end up getting co-opted to basically re-express the flagella, and they gain it again under severe selection, and off they go. So like they resurrect their flagella through co-option of other material there in the genome. Yield mic.
I think P-Town wanted to respond. I'm not sure though.
Hey James,
I was just going to say back to what you were saying, Immutable. I think I understand the logic behind it or the process that you're describing. I just haven't seen evidence for it. Like,
James, if there's people backstage,
Yeah,
can we
in
bring
that
them in?
case. So
Like
in that case, I would strongly recommend reading or finding a summary on the Linsky experiments. So P-Town, in that case, I would strongly suggest reading experiments that or it's reading like a synopsis of like the Lenski experiments, because it describes
And that well,
fairly
and that's
well. I
where
mean, Götze Gibbon
I'll
and,
take a note of
Dr.
that.
Stan.
When I have looked at experiments or evidence for it, it's usually the component that they're referring to is extrapolated from another larger component, mechanism, whatever you want to call it. And so it's because I clearly believe that there are similarities within the organisms and animals. It's just one, similar creator, similar designer. So in order to have, just because you find the other components,
yeah, that's like
it still relies. You still rely on the assumption that God just didn't do it. It's just an assumption.
Well, that's not.
That's foundational.
So, P-Town, let me try to
Can you
clarify
demonstrate
in that
the
case, right?
God?
The assumption isn't that God didn't do anything, right? It's that if God did do something, right? Like, even if I grant the idea of a creator having done something to bring life into existence, right? The state we're in now is one where I can observe different things about organisms. I can observe the different features organisms have, be the morphological characteristics, be it genetic characteristics, and I can infer things about the patterns that I see, right? And we can debate about certain scientific mechanisms and their scope, right? But the idea is going to be, I don't know, like, even if you propose a model for, God did a thing and now life exists, right? Okay. I don't know how to test for that in a scientific lens, right? Because we don't know how God could interact with the natural world, right? He could have done it in any number of ways.
Just a couple minutes, okay?
Yeah, what scientists?
What was the guy? What was the guy's name? Lelensky.
Lenski, Lenski.
Lenski.
I put a link to the Wikipedia article in the private chat again if you're interested.
The Lenski experiment was brought up in tonight's debate by Sal, erroneously.
When is something brought up by Sal
sure
and it's not
things to
erroneous? Or a quote mine. It's one of the two.
I'm sure Sal was going to try to argue it's the loss of information or some crap.
Yep, that was exactly the point. And I just said, why don't you look at what the experimental design was selecting for, and then that will completely explain the results.
Oh. And the thing is, too, like, there's other lesser-known experiments where, for instance, like, a fun fact about biology, or just kind of crash course, like, genetics 101, for genes to do the certain thing they need to do, that is, go on to be, go under replication, create a protein, all that fun stuff, you need things like enhancing, what are called enhancers and promoters. Although, experimentally, it's been shown that you can remove these elements from a gene. So you can take a gene, you can remove the parts that are known to be enhancers and promoters, and you can just replace it with just gibberish in a cell and let the organism effectively let different strains of the organism compete to find new promoting and enhancing strains that will get that gene back up and running. And this has been an
increase function naturally.
These are people who think that because Microsoft writes Word in Office, and some of the codes will look the same if you disassemble them or decompile them, that therefore the same lines of code are copied over, rather than what is usually the case. I'm sure some of them are. Microsoft is using libraries to achieve the same functions, and not really understanding the analogy doesn't hold.
I mean, functionality is what we're.
I don't know if I'm just too ignorant on programming.
Sorry, it was a Kent Hovind thing that just
like the curious thing is that for something, like the really weird thing about biology itself is that for a lot of things, like there are motifs in biology regarding, like, say, protein structure or just kind of patterns in biology that tend to be the norm that biological organisms stick with. So I mean, it's kind of analogous to that example of, like, if you have a code that runs functionally, like in one language, and you're trying to develop something that's slightly more complex, if you can use the same code to achieve, part of that function, do it. Right?
Well, I'm just
Reuse
saying
things where it's necessary, and don't be innovative.
What Kent Hovind gets
You don't
wrong when he
have
does
to.
what Kent Hovind gets wrong when he does that is just assuming they're just going to copy lines over, because unless you're doing an assembly language where it's kind of necessary, there's a saying that programmers hear over and over again: don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. If there's a library that does something,
right,
use it. And to do something like Microsoft Word, they have tons of libraries that perform these functions. And Kent's like, oh yeah, there's hundreds of lines of code that are the same. It's like, no, there might be, and there probably are, just because they're doing similar things. But a lot of times they're calling these libraries to do these things over and over again.
Also, just don't listen
I
to
have to
Kent
go
Hovind.
read my daughter a book.
Better idea.
So I have to go put my little one down.
All right.
I might come back on if you guys are still around.
In any event, good chat. Nice seeing you around.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
we won't be.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
That was surprisingly decent chat.
Yeah, I had questions, but
For a
maybe
peak
I'll
on
be
chat,
back.
yeah.
Given that our only holdup was on him defining the term blob.
I don't think that was a holdup. I think what you do is you hold your opponent's feet to the fire. Okay, you're going to be serious and confident in claiming that you're measuring complexity in blobs. Okay, so what are blobs? Why wouldn't you do that?
I mean,
Okay, you want to be funny?
it,
Okay,
though. You
let's
said
be
it is
funny.
just. No, I mean, I think he was doing that genuinely because, like, he's not familiar enough, like, with different names of organelles, like NSL.
Yeah, that's the
in
problem. He
fairness,
doesn't know what he's fucking talking
why
about.
would you
but he's
be
sitting
unless
here
you've
saying that evolution is wrong.
Well, I mean, I don't know as much about biology as some of you.
Yeah, but that's like the only reason I know the names of some of like the organelles in a cell is because I've had to study biochemistry. So, like, I can't entirely blame people for doing that.
And
Well, yeah, I'm not
just
saying that we
wondering
can
if
blame.
I've started to become cynical because wow, my innocence is already gone.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't like respect
All right.
the average person's ignorance on the complexities of subjects within the scientific realm. What I'm saying is that if you're going to argue that gravity isn't real, but you don't know anything about the basics of tensor analysis such that you could do or be educated in general relativity, then you're just talking out your ass. It doesn't matter that you don't understand the jargon. You don't understand it because you're ignorant of the subject. That alone is not what's wrong. What's wrong is when you're ignorant of the subject and then sit there and confidently claim about how this is wrong and this is false and this doesn't work, despite being as ignorant as you are.
So
yeah, I
think organelles is the word that he was looking for, right? I lose words too, though, Leo.
Yeah.
So I mean,
But again, I'm not saying that it's wrong to lose words or it's wrong to not understand the jargon. I'm saying that it's wrong. I'm not saying that it's wrong to be ignorant on a subject. I'm saying that it's wrong to be ignorant on the subject and then confidently claim very wrong things about it. You guys aren't doing that second part, so I'm not speaking to those kinds of instances.
The internet is a series of tubes. Change my mind.
Well, that depends on how you define tubes, but
I mean, I think the fundamental error that like him and a lot of creationists make is that with complexity, it's not that you can't define complexity in the context of like a cell. The issue is more so that you can define complexity in so many different kinds of ways, such that like if I compare any two models arbitrarily, right, I can get different like relative measures of complexity that order like an arbitrary degrees of magnitude with one another, right?
Well, the only forms,
in my opinion, there is no one-size-fit-all way to measure complexity, like in a cell, like or in any system for that matter, really.
well, there is a way to measure certain types of complexity within programs.
Well, sure,
Because
like
the
that's the
limitation
thing.
of the
Like
system now
with the system, sure, like you can measure different kinds of complexity, like how long does it take for an algorithm to run versus various other things you may be interested in, versus like how long it takes a computer like to execute that program. But that's because like you can quantify it because you're interested in a certain aspect of that program, right?
Well,
but
as long as I never have
this
to
is kind of the
improve,
point.
as long as I never have to prove by induction that merge sort is faster than bubble sort.
Yeah.
Leave that to people that do math.
But
No,
again,
that's a computer science thing, most definitely.
So you're talking about the difference between a system of on and off switch and a system of like actual physical chemical reactions, though. So it's that's where people get confused when they're comparing computer coding to like DNA code and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
On and off switches is the wrong thing there because computer coding is more of an abstraction, but close enough.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
people tend to like think of when they think of DNA. When they think of DNA, they want it to be that simple, and it's not. It's actual chemicals reacting together. You know, it's not just a written language or something in some metaphysical system.
Well, if they can prove DNA is Turing complete, I'll start buying another one of their arguments.
That it's funny you mentioned that. I would ask, like, do you think DNA is Turing complete?
I would say no, but if you could come up with a mathematical proof, because you can prove things are Turing complete mathematically, I would have to say I was wrong.
That would be interesting.
I
You
mean,
think
it
you
can
can do it
do
with
and
bird songs?
it can do like and if and or statements, can't it?
As far as I know, it can't. I think a lot of people get confused because DNA computing exists where we're using machines. And essentially we're reading DNA like we read computer memory. The way
I'm more interested in using that to understand like animal languages, though.
But
could we use that to translate like bird calls and stuff like that?
Do animals really
Crickets?
have languages, though? I don't know.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, depends on how complex, but yes.
So how are we using language here?
Different songbirds have language.
Yeah,
I mean, personally, I would define language as
Icarus. That's not how mathematical proof sorry, that's not how the mathematical proof would work. And secondly, I'm not arguing that humans aren't Turing complete. Humans are.
So personally, I would define language as a transfer of information via signals that can be accomplished via signaling or via like vocal communication. There's a lot of different levels to language. Like body language is a thing, you know?
I don't remember what primate this was that I was reading about. So basically they have different verbal communication for like climbing a tree versus lay on the ground versus like whether or not the predators coming from the sky versus
that's actually a lot of primates.
Oh yeah,
a lot of primates.
I mean, even
they have
maybe not the tree thing, but like fish probably could do that.
Well,
so like just like I'm losing my thought.
Bree, help me out. What are the monkeys with blue dicks?
Got 6 given to the video on this called
blue balls.
They also go through a period
vervet monkeys. Vervet monkeys have different calls to denote different predators in different harmful situations.
Yeah, and so like growing up, they like some of them because they mistranslate the signals. They end up doing the wrong thing, like climbing a tree instead of going to the ground, or going to the ground instead of climbing the tree, and like exposing themselves and stuff. So they have to learn.
Well, that's the thing. That species will expose themselves to predators if it helps their immediate family. It's actually pretty well documented in vervet monkeys.
Flash some big blue balls at them so they come get some of these big
monkey
balls.
They will intentionally like hoot and holler if their family is nearby, but they won't if like monkeys they don't know are nearby. It's really interesting.
That's You get like the mandrill where that's really, really pronounced, and they got the colorful face in the male, so all attention's on him, and the rest of them kind of melt into the background, right? The whole rest of the troop, and he's just this big monstrous beast of a male in the middle of everybody.
I just love these two nerds going, or
all these
nerds
I feel like
going
if
at
I
it.
were to have to look up, I feel like if I like search up like the intricacies of like primate, like different like monkeys like sex routines and like mating calls like for sexual behavior, my internet history is just going to be completely shot more than it already is.
Probably, but the more you look into the more you look into primate behavior, the more you realize humans really aren't that special.
Well, Drace has been reading some stuff about
the more you
primate
realize
behavior and sexual selection here on his channel lately. Are you still with us, Drace?
Oh.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you've been doing some sexual selection stuff about primates.
Wow,
on
you went
your
from
channel, haven't you?
abiogenesis to frickin' monkey sex.
I mean, it's a more interesting topic because at least there's something to talk about.
At least we're not,
okay, that's selling it short, but
at least we're not doing algebra over how to determine the complexity by number of blobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, both topics
And
are
by the
totally
way, the derivative of that was 2.
Origin of life, and like basically what I've been doing in reading about in paleoanthropology is basically like history of violence and human evolution, and like like to what extent was our ancestral condition violent versus not, and also like really interested to read more into like what it was that drove, if I guess if anything, but what it was that drove the development of intelligence in genus Homo. I think that's like a really interesting topic. I have John Allen. I have a book by him that was published in 2009 that I'm going to go through soon.
BTF Wayne, the reasons there are still monkeys is because Michael Nesmith hasn't died yet.
But also, semi-related to that, we can tell via fossil evidence when I was about to say Homo sapiens, when humans started to really become apex predators. Because we have Homo erectus who were fossilized with vitamin A poisoning.
Hey, Athena.
Wait, with what?
Vitamin A.
With vitamin A poisoning, which is really commonly associated with eating the organs of I think mostly predators, but eating organs. And during that time, we also see a lot more animals with their bodies having been chopped up by stone tools.
Athena, what are you up?
Butchers of the days of yore, I suppose.
I'm not going to derail.
Anthropology is interesting. I just think dinosaurs are more so.
They may be.
Feel that
I
big
haven't read nearly enough about dinosaurs, but I think both topics, origin of life and paleoanthropology, are awesome topics. I don't plan on derailing this conversation away from abio. I hope it continues on. I got some questions for Immutable too. Just like update on where he's at.
Sure. I think we stopped talking. I think we stopped talking about abio when we started talking about monkey balls and different sexual routines that what monkeys do to sexually entice other monkeys to.
Hey, if you want, I could start gushing about the dry island bone bed.
So, what was the most primitive? What was the most commonly used programming language by Homo erectus? I'm guessing Fortran.
It was called Bonk Bonk.
I'm gonna guess Java. Well, okay.
Hey, shit, that's good.
Isn't that just the hobbits?
No, Java Man was I think one of the first names for Homo erectus.
Java, I think so. Yeah, it was. Java Man was it was like the. Yeah, I think that's right.
Did man like
his
Java?
Trace, you wanted to ask me questions about abio?
Yeah, you still chilling over there with Sutherland doing like cyanosulfidic protometabolism and wet dry cycles and stuff like that. Is that where you're chilling?
I think so. I mean, I haven't checked up on Sutherland in a hot minute. I think he's probably doing more or less the same thing. I mean, I remember he did collaborations with Shostak, like with certain kinds of like RNA world models. Honestly, like I've been very, very busy, so I haven't really committed too much more time to the abiogenesis thing. Although, like a curiosity that I've started to get into because of the mathematics is just kind of dynamical systems as a thing, and kind of as, like in that case, I'll probably be like Nick's literature.
I'm just glad to be taking
as well, wanting to view life through that lens.
I'm just glad to be taking a break from doing any math until I start my master's in.
Well,
I don't know if
that answers your question, Trace, but
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it does. It does. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Whoever was.
No, yeah, not you first. Mine's a tangent.
I was going to say I've already done enough math to get my computer science degree at this point.
I mean, the only thing I can say, you know, I've kept on reading, but like I have 2 projects now instead of just the one, so like my attention's kind of split. But I've still been trying my best to keep up. There's this researcher. There's a bunch of them on Twitter, but one of them releases a weekly Origin of Life digest that has like, you know, a little over a dozen like recent papers that he finds, and he releases that every week. So I try to keep up with that and other stuff. But I gotta say, like my like continuing with this, I have to say my impression is that like right now the public is being convinced or like in this debate over whether or not this field like has made any progress, and they're confused about that. But like while I'm reading through this stuff, like I feel like so much stuff has been like plausibly answered by now that like this field is going through a fucking renaissance over the past 20 years. And like the things that they found out are just so fucking cool. And just like all the different kinds of experiments from all the different angles that can give you a bird's eye view that's just like so comprehensive at this point that like it's really sad that everybody ends up missing out on like what they've really done. Like even they themselves are too modest, I think, about what they've really done.
I mean, that's kind of true for a lot of the life sciences. There's been a massive boom in the last few decades.
One, it's hard to keep up all the sciences, and I have some.
Yeah, it's true.
I have some machine learning papers.
Dessel, could you do me a favor and Dessel, could you do me a favor and post either like the user handle to the Twitter handle or to the private chat, I guess?
I'll I have your.
You still check
yeah, do you still check your email? Because I'll just email you a link directly to his page. All right, cool. Yeah, so I'll email you his.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I still have some artificial intelligence and machine learning papers I need to go over.
Ooh. I was seriously so excited to talk about the
Dessel, I would
differences
ask you
the Cyrenix and the Larynx and language, and you all just steamrolled right past
You mean
it.
larynx and syrinx?
Yeah.
Well, I believe one's based on the Linux kernel and the other one's based on the BSD kernel.
Okay.
Okay,
the tangent I was going to bring up a little bit ago. Well, the tangent I was going to bring up a little bit ago. We might not be 100% sure about abiogenesis, but what happened after? We have a pretty dang good handle on it, and I just feel I have to plug Aaron Ra's
I would
series on it. It's really good.
All of his stuff is good. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's true. Although I would say like within Origin of Life communities, and some do consider this question to be part of it, Origin of Life, but for different reasons. I would say the part that's not really understood, for instance, is like once you have Fuka, so the first universal common ancestor. Actually, no, wait. The major point that I want to say is the diversification of like whatever the original life was into the 3 common domains is something that's like still like not understood very well about like regarding Origin of Life.
There's
I
little
mean-
record of it, right? It's all chemical
Yeah, there's-
stains from the past, basically.
Yeah, very little record, and also just unicellular organisms and their damn horizontal gene transfer.
Yeah, I was going to say, aren't bacteria really just
Yeah,
notorious
precisely.
for-
It's
just
very
single-celled
hard.
organisms in general.
That's the thing. Like, it's very hard. Yeah, it's very hard to find reliable molecular fossils for kind of like tracing that kind of evolution, like all the way
Atmospheric
back.
stuff is
So-
traces is what we generally go off of.
Yeah, isotopes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, like one, you might be able to do a little something with like phylogenetic search with respect to like the membranes, because like one of the things that's cool about hydrothermal vents is you have that radiation of the bacteria first and the archaea second, based on how they go about membrane formation to maintain proton motive force. And so like they do that in different ways and end up with these two different, basically membrane structures, and diverge from the vent, like basically stop feeding off of the vent and merging out themselves at two separate times.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other approach that that's been proposed and that's been a work in progress is trying to study these organisms which have gotten the name of they're organisms that are I forget. No, they're archaea, I think. In any event, the thing that's special about these organisms is that they're organisms which have what are called ESG genes, so eukaryotic specific genes that up to a few years ago were suspected to only exist in eukaryotes, but they were found in like these archaea, which is rather surprising, and trying to figure out what exactly the function of these ESG genes are, or what they serve in like archaea, and hope that might give us some insight as to what primitive life might have been like.
Yeah, like that's a good detective's way to narrow it down. I was going through this paper recently. I think it was one by Lori Barge, and she talks about how they say anyway, that like bottom up ways, like basically chemical synthesis experiments, aren't able to like really narrow down what really happened in terms of a historical question of how life actually got here, versus like innumerable potential ways for life to emerge, but not the one that actually happened. But you can do it through phylogenetic analysis, because that actually traces you through the history. It helps you reconstruct the history. I don't totally buy into like the divide she's making, because I think that like through discovering different chemical pathways and discovering what works and what doesn't work, like you still are narrowing down like the field of plausible explanations, right? So, still.
Right. I mean, I think the reason they're taking that approach is that the reason you kind of take a top-down approach from their perspective is that the bottom-up approach, once you have the like sufficient development of self-replicators, it's possible that the kinds of chemistry that existed like in the very, very beginning become overridden just because of like the increase in complexity that takes place, right? So the more efficient you are as a system that's able to capture and utilize energy, the more energy and resources you have to explore options to better utilize energy at the cost of kind of changing certain ways that chemistry occurs, right? And like regulation or things like that. Whereas with the
Sorry, but I gotta head to bed. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, take care.
Have a good
But
night. Thanks so much, Dr. Dino.
But to the point of people doing like the top-down approach, the point is, like these molecular fossils tell you about what did occur rather than possible pathways that could have occurred. So it helps you limit kind of what possibilities are more viable than others, or at least more plausible than others.
What about like something that got brought up in tonight's debate was the asphalt paradox, and and I think I heard Grayson say on the other after show, that he can't comment on things that haven't been worked out yet in the field. But with the asphalt paradox and the water paradox, there's a bunch of stuff on that by now, and I'm just wondering, we've talked about the water paradox before, but where do you stand on those two now? What are your feelings on asphalt and water paradox?
Are you asking me or Bertrand or the other guy?
How about everybody who wants to answer?
Okay. I can't comment too much about the asphalt paradox because I'm not overly familiar with it. And even if I were, I haven't read too many papers that go into development of methodology for dealing with it. The water paradox, though, you can respond to it by either invoking wet-dry cycling, which is kind of a natural approach to deal with it, which I'm partially still sympathetic towards. I need to check to see what all they've done. But the other approach you can use is something like deep sea hydrothermal vents, where you have mineral chemistry that selectively includes or excludes water for certain reactions that occur.
So, are we talking about the hydrophobic nature of early biotic life? Is that? I mean,
so
okay.
The water paradox, as I understand it, is that the presence of water, an example might be peptides. So peptides, when they react to form, let's say a dipeptide, so a protein of length 2, the issue tends to be that when you do this, what you generate is water as a product.
Well,
and in a situation where you're in water, that kind of reaction is not very thermodynamically favored. And the question that naively gets asked is, how exactly do you get processes that favoring water as a product in environments that have already, effectively infinite amounts of water in them already? I think that's kind of a synopsis of the water paradox.
And with the yeah, that's and with the just to say what the asphalt paradox is real quick. So basically, when you're making something like a sugar, and you keep it under this you keep it under the same conditions that you need to synthesize it under, right? So let's say you're using hot temperatures to accelerate this reaction. It's under a high pH because you're doing the Foremost reaction, and so in these conditions, the product tends to the word they use is tar. It forms this mixture, and the argument from somebody like Benner was it forms this tar stuff, and this is very what he said was inauspicious for prebiotic chemistry. That it doesn't seem like it maintains the structures that it needs. Instead, it forms this tar.
I'd like to take a second to just welcome is this Nephilim Free to the stage here.
Yes,
hello.
Yes.
Hello, guys. Can you be here? Can I be heard?
Yeah.
My audio working?
Hello. Yep, I can hear you.
We hear you loud and clear.
Out of hiding.
Great.
There we go.
Great.
All
Hope
right.
everybody is well.
Abiogenesis, what do you got, Neff?
Well, I would just point out a glaring error in Grayson's argument. I didn't watch the whole debate. I had something I was doing. I just caught a part of it. I will go back, probably watch most of it. But I would point out that he made the same glaring mistake that evolutionists almost always make when they cite science papers. And so he cited this evolutionary transition from the single RNA replicator to a multiple replicator network, this science paper, as support for abiogenesis. Now, there's a couple of serious problems with that. If you read the paper, the researchers acknowledge the very same thing they always seem to acknowledge in these researches. The evolutionists claim support their views. they describe how they designed everything, built everything, and then pulled the cord on it and let it go.
Okay.
I mean,
hold on. Let him finish.
So that's and that's a very, very egregious error in thinking, right? They start the experiment by the paper by stating, in this experiment, we repetitively performed RNA replication by incubating. Okay, so they incubated replication systems, or where they get the replication systems. Okay, well, they were borrowed from bacteria, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They maintain balance, the temperature of the solution, pH balances, careful salinity. Everything is going is highly, very, very carefully conceived and built. In fact, when researchers build these kinds of experiments, they typically have to throw out more samples than they actually end up getting because the things are not just right. They throw it out, that didn't work. Keep working to get just the right balance, right temperature, like pH, like salinity, right this and that, right numbers of these. Nope, it's wrong. Try again. Throw it out. Start all over again. They do that over and over and over and over and over until they get exactly what they want. Then they pull the cord on the lawnmower and watch it go down across the yard. And that's, you can't claim that you see a naturalistic process occur to do a thing when you've built everything that it takes for it to do. All they're relying on is the fact that these replicators work in cells and they just watching them go. But the second glaring areas that they introduced, they discussed how many mutations to this RNA strands that they discovered. They saw 111 mutations. And in bioscience, mutations destroy. They don't build or design.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
That's a claim, but at the very
that's not true. Let me just quote this one source, and then I'll be done.
Let's put a bow on it, and then let some people respond.
Let me just cite this one source for that, and then I'll be done with that. I quote Dr. Alexander Williams, a botanist, researcher associate at the Western Australian Herbarium. In medical circles, mutations are universally regarded as deleterious. They are fundamentally the cause of aging, cancer, and infectious disease. So it's not true. The science journals in the medical fields are all rife with papers that describe the known effects of mutation as weakness, biochemical weakness, physical deformities which result in handicaps or death. Not designers. Nobody's ever demonstrated that.
So you're talking about one specific class of mutations, and
hold on,
as it pertains to the medical field.
I want to address his first error he seemed to make, and he didn't. I don't know if he caught this. You do realize if all of our abiogenesis hypotheses are false and proven false, that there's absolutely nothing on evolution, right? Because that was a category error.
I'm sorry. Repeat that, please, because I don't want to misrepresent your question.
You just made a mistake. You're trying to say evolution is false because our abiogenesis research is wrong.
No, I'm talking about abiogenesis.
Stop. You're trying to lump evolution and abiogenesis together. Abiogenesis does not matter to evolution because evolution only occurs when life starts and reproduces with modifications.
I didn't do that.
I think you have misunderstood something about mutations, but I think the other people are going to address that, so I'm going to mute myself.
I mean, I think the more egregious there is just, I don't know if Nephilim is like familiar at all with experimental methodology, and if he is, how exactly he would propose we change it to do science. Because the way you do science is that you design certain...
Can we let Nephilim address Sinister first, and then you all can all take turns, and that way it doesn't feel dogpiled. Do you want to address what Sinister Porpoise said here?
Yeah, well, I was speaking about this abiogenesis, alleged evidence of supporting abiogenesis. I wasn't talking about evolution theory, but nonetheless, if we consider what mutations do to organisms, that are, in your opinion, evolved, we still see that they're deleterious, and they cause it's well known that they cause a deletion of genetic information by promoting certain other genetic information. They often delete or turn off genes that make them dormant that don't get expressed. So it's a reduction. So consider evolution in the mind of the evolutionist is like taking a book and saying, okay, we're gonna take these passages out of the book and we're gonna promote them to the next copy, right?
Okay,
but we're gonna leave out all these others,
second.
right? In the end, you've just lost a lot of information. And
I need to stop you for a
the
second.
loss of
because
information is not good.
You're making another error I always see made, and it just depends on how you define information.
No, that's what the scientists, researchers in that very paper acknowledge.
I'm telling you something you need to know. The analogy you're trying to use, which is common among creationists, is an informatics analogy. And if you're going to use that analogy in DNA is not information in informatics, it is data.
Okay, that's incorrect.
That is absolutely correct for informatics.
Okay, we're going to give Neff the final word here, and then Immutable wants to chime in. So
all of biology
never
is
respond.
All of biology is information driven. All of it. Everything about biology we know today is driven by information. But the researchers in that very paper acknowledge that certain genetic information in these RNA strands that they replicated cause certain base pairs. I mean, not base pairs, but nucleotides and sequences of nucleotides to be promoted while others are neglected. And that's the same process that happens with some types of genetic mutation, is that entire genes are turned off and lost or not expressed. It might still be present in the DNA, but not expressed in the animal anymore. That's how you get different breeds of dog, by promoting certain genes and turning others off. That's a loss of genetic information. And that's how you get a Chihuahua that's missing most of its hair, has a deformed tongue, has a snout that's too short. Okay, that's exactly how you get such an animal.
Okay,
now-
wait. Nephilim, I need some clarification on that though, right? Like, let's say we have two dogs that share the exact same genetic information, right? Like down to the base pair. But the only difference in what they actually have, like the thing that accounts for their like physical characteristics and differences, is in terms of like what genes are expressed given, you know, like the lineage of dog that they are. Like that's an epigenetic difference rather than a genetic difference, right? But there is no like definitionally. Well, but in that case, then, like, what exactly are you claiming is causing a decrease in information if they both have the same genome?
Well, if they start with one particular
like, if we're going to
DNA
do this,
RNA,
let's be specific.
Right. Well, if they start with one RNA strand and they end up with a different one, and some of the the base pairs, I mean, not base pairs, but the nucleotides of the original are lost. They're not even there anymore in their experiment. They're just not there. So that would constitute a loss of original information. Okay. And that's not a good thing for
I don't know about
to lose genetic information.
Well, Neff,
Can I
mean,
ask a clarifying question
would
here?
you agree to the following point, right? Can I
go ahead.
Neff, can we agree on the following point though? Like that, if the RNA and like let's say, and I don't know if this is the correct figure, right? Let's say, for sake of argument, the RNA is 200 base pairs, like in length, right? The original one before things happened to it, right? And that like 10% of that is responsible for the actual activity of the RNA and what it does. Like if you take out like 90% of the information, still have those 20. Right, that are responsible for doing what it's supposed to do. Like, yes, you've lost information with regard to the entire sequence, but like the functional information that the sequence bears hasn't changed at all. Right?
Well, that's
because what it did. Neff, like,
can you restate
it's kind of like
you just said you've lost 90% of it, but you
hold on, let him restate it.
Part.
Neff, let him restate it real quick.
Nephilim, let me restate it this way, right? If I have if I have a certain nucleotide sequence of a certain length, right, that is responsible for some activity, and I get rid of some of like the overall information of that sequence, right, but not information that contributes to the functional activity of it, have I lost information?
Well, you're claiming to know the function or non-function of all of the information. Firstly, that's your first egregious error.
Well,
you don't even know that.
Right? Okay. Well, Nephilim,
Secondly,
first of all,
you're
well,
still
Nephilim,
talking
first
about.
of all, can we hold on? Let me address the point. Can we or can we not determine what units, right? Like let's say in a protein or in a RNA sequence are responsible for activity?
Not necessarily. There's so much we don't know about genetic.
Well, then how do you know?
Well, I mean,
okay,
DNA,
then how
genetic.
do you know?
Wait, can I respond? Let me respond. Okay. So
well,
my response
the
would
thing
be
is,
that
Nephilim,
genetic. Well, wait a minute. Let me respond.
Immutable,
or no.
let him respond.
Very
first.
quickly now. Come on.
Yeah, you asked me a
Okay.
question. Right. Okay. So we know today that genetic information is overlapping and nested in the DNA. Right. In the DNA, genetic information is okay. So any given nucleotide along the strand of DNA is likely part of more than one sequence of information at the same time, possibly several, because DNA sequences are complexly overlapping and nested. It's the most compressed information package known to exist. Right. So complexly overlapping and nested, we can't even replicate that with software. So if you're talking about losing 90% of it just to promote 10%, it's still a profound loss of genetic information to assume that 90% had no function just because you might know a function of 100 base pairs, but don't know what the rest of the other 900 do. It is preposterous in considering what we know about genetic information today.
All right, Immutable can respond now.
Okay, but so the first issue with that, number one, is that if you can never determine what fraction of a given sequence is responsible for the function of, like, let's say a gene or just like some RNA sequence in general, right, then trying to make a point about mutations causing a loss or gain of information is trivial, because you can't determine what fraction of the sequence. Hold on, Neff. If you can't determine what fraction of a sequence is responsible for functional information, right? Saying mutation causes that fraction of functional information to decrease presupposes, as part of its assumption, that you know what percentage is responsible to begin with. But the other point is that the example we're talking about with RNA replicating, hold on, I let you finish talking. But the other thing is, we're talking about like the information like of a sequence with respect to a certain function, right? That could be, for instance, how well a certain RNA sequence replicates. What it does in other parts of the genome are auxiliary to the main question.
You're simply assuming that because we don't, evolutionists have made this mistake many times. You're assuming that simply, and they did this with junk DNA. The junk DNA paradigm has been overthrown, thrown out, even by evolutionist professors themselves. They acknowledged junk DNA was wrong to begin with. We shouldn't use the term.
I could care less.
Ewan Burney of the Human Genome Project acknowledged that the term should be expunged from academia. It's worthless today. So, but you're assuming that 90% of it has no function.
Let's get back to the original
because
point.
you don't know, just because you don't know the function of it, and that'd be a terrible mistake to make.
For the sake of hypothetical. Well,
I actually have a point to address to you then, Immutable.
Let's give Sinister Porpoise a second just to speak here.
Just one question though, right?
Go ahead.
Immutable, you have the floor.
The question I would have is that if you do, yeah, okay. Hello.
Immutable, you seem to have about a 3-second delay. Just to let you know.
So, like, yeah, like the question I would ask in Nephilim in that case is that if you do experiments and what you determine is that 90% of your sequence doesn't contribute in any meaningful way to the function, what basis do you have to say that it actually does do something?
So again, I point you to the RNA, the junk DNA paradigm that has been overturned for about 18, 20 years now. That not knowing the function of sequence of base pairs in the DNA doesn't mean it doesn't have function. It almost certainly does. Even they know that even tandem repeats long sequences of DNA that seem to don't say anything because it looks like garble. It's just repetition of certain base pairs, just numerous repetition. We know those have function today, even structural function in how the DNA is supercoiled and maintained as a product in the cell. So we haven't discovered that any sequence of information doesn't have function. Because we don't know of the function of it doesn't mean or give us even reason to believe it doesn't have function, considering that no matter that the more they study DNA sequences, even those that seem to be tandem repeats, the more we study them, the more functions we find. And that's why the junk DNA paradigm was thrown out, because the evolutionists assumed that because we don't know the function of it, or it doesn't code for a protein, that was the big claim, it must be junk, which we today know is not true. It seems as though the entire DNA molecule is either structural information at the very least, or it's epigenetic information, on meta information, information about how to utilize other information. And so it's an egregious mistake to say, because we don't know the function of it, and think, well, it's plausible that it doesn't have function. That's a terrible mistake to make in genetics.
Okay, before we move forward, I want to take just a second to welcome Stephanie.
I would need.
Okay. And then you all can have your responses, okay? So, Steph, if you want to say anything about,
I don't think we'll be able to get anybody else on because y'all on borrowed time as it is. But
I have a 500
after this.
I have a
and I think if Dessa wants to. If Dessa wants to take. Sorry.
I have a 500.
No, Porpoise, just hold on. Let's let Stephanie about the topic of the stream, if she wants to come on and say anything about abiogenesis on trial before we move forward, because that's what we're bringing people on for, right, James?
That was originally the topic, yeah. Let's see what Stephanie wants to add.
Well, it's a fascinating debate, and this is a fascinating conversation. I just on the most recent topic that Nephilim's bringing up here, I just want to take some issue with the notion of that loss of genetic information, or at least the loss of the loss of expression of genetic information is inevitably harmful. Am I straw manning you there, or are you making that argument that if genetic information is not expressed, it's inevitably a loss? It's harm. I want to be clear before I.
Recessive genes notwithstanding.
Yeah, I would cite Scientific American 2007 that states, although catchy, the term junk DNA replicated mainstream researchers from studying non-coding.
No. Wait, I don't think I don't think he understood my question.
Yeah, I did understand your question and responded to it.
Then fine, go right ahead.
Let him have his response.
Okay. Okay, so I would just cite you the Scientific American 2007, Dan Auger 2017, Scientific American November 2003, and the ENCODE project. And I could cite numerous examples, of scientists, secular ones, who acknowledge that because we don't know the function of a given strand of DNA, is not an implication that it has no function, but instead we continuously discovered that it is functional, and the idea that it probably doesn't is wrong. It almost certainly does, and that is what is the consensus in science today.
All right, Stephanie, you want to respond to that?
I just have I want to follow up because I have another question. Perhaps I misunderstood. You made a comment, I believe, earlier about how evolution is, well, from your point of view, evolution is falsified because certain information is lost in the genome. Did I mishear you?
No, well, what I'm saying is the research that was cited by Grayson discusses certain portions of RNA strands being lost in the next copy. They're not talking about epigenetically turned off and not expressed, because they can't. Their research didn't show any such thing about genetic information expression in an organismal level. Okay, so because that's not what it was designed to do, and it couldn't have shown that. But they're just talking about the nucleotides not even being there anymore. They're just gone.
So,
right. So that would constitute,
just a sec.
considering what we know about genetics, that would constitute an egregious loss of genetic information.
All right, go ahead, Steph.
So if you could pause there for a sec.
Talking.
Is it, please? Is such a loss always deleterious to the health and success of the organism?
That is what mainstream science is showing us, which is why so many years ago, Alexei Kondrashov, one of the world's foremost geneticists, wrote a paper saying the degeneration of the human genome by slightly deleterious mutations. Why have we not gone extinct 100 times over? And that was in 1990.
If I could ask this question, if the genetic information responsible for a heritable disease, such as ALS or MS, or or any number. You pick your genetically inheritable disease. If that information were lost, would that be deleterious to the organism?
Almost certainly, considering what we know about DNA today. As I said, DNA is now known to be extremely compressed. It's highly overlapping and nested. There are genes within genes that are part of other genes that are part of other genes. If you break one of them, you just broke 3 genes. So even if it causes
the answer is yes.
Let him finish, Steph.
Let me finish.
Okay,
I'll be
go
brief.
ahead.
Okay. So even if you've lost one negative thing by losing that genetic information, you've probably also lost other genetic information that's part of something that is useful to or necessary even for the health of the organism. Okay. So losing something negative in DNA is likely, knowing what we know about the compressed nature of genetic information, likely losing other information that's helpful or useful for the organism.
We're gonna let Steph respond to this. Hold on, Steph. We're gonna let Steph respond to this, and then we're gonna let some of the other people on the panel chime in. Okay.
And I would say that neither you nor I possess the genetic information necessary to cause. I hope. I'm making an assumption here, but I hope that you don't have MS and I don't have MS. Neither of us possesses that genetic information. We can't pass it on to our offspring. And to the extent that we don't have that genetic information, I would posit that it is actually better not only for us as living organisms, but for those who would inherit our genes to not have that information.
But you realize
the same goes for sickle cell anemia. The same goes for any number of diseases like that.
I understand that, but as I said, losing
it's not
something
always
negative.
true, but I'm just saying it's not always a negative, and I think that's you're creating a foundation.
How do you know that it's all?
We're going to give Neff the final word on this, and then we're going to let somebody else into the conversation here. Okay.
So the giveaway is your claim that it's not always a loss of information. Is you can't know that because you don't know.
No, it's not always deleterious, is what I said. Let's be clear.
And you can't know that.
Let's give him the final word on this, and then.
He's not going to get the final word by lying about what I said.
No, I'm not lying. I'm giving you what the consensus of geneticists is today. Okay.
Okay.
And that is this. because you're firstly you're assuming that there isn't function. So again, you can't know what the function of something that's lost might be. And the consensus today is that because we don't, even though we don't know what the function of a given strand of DNA is, doesn't imply that it doesn't have function. It almost certainly does based on research. For example, 90-something% of the DNA molecule is now known to be expressed in one way or another, much of it coding for RNAs. That's completely in the face of the junk DNA paradigm that was held to ardently by evolutionists right through the 1990s and later. Okay, because they've discovered that 90 some odd percent of DNA is transcribed into RNA. 90 some odd percent. That's
Okay.
like almost all of it. See, and RNAs are the workhorse of the cell, right?
Let's give James what direction you want to take. We're going to pull us back to abiogenesis and do a round of just back and forth between these guys.
I'd
You wanna
start with Sinister at the top, and we can go to Mutable. And...
Yeah.
I
Okay.
correct myself. 87%, not 90. 87.
I just
if I could, I would want to. It's getting a little late, so if I could go first, I'd be.
well, I have something I wanted to address to you. So.
If it's all right.
Okay. You go
And
first, go too.
oddly enough, Nephilim got something right, but almost. Technically, if I lose any data on this drive, and it is data, it's not information until it's interpreted by my machine and in a form I can read it, I do lose the data even if the data is useless. It may not be useful data, but I still lose it if I lose, like, delete a file or something and can't recover it. It's gone. So just so you know that.
Yeah, but so the thing is, you guys are what
And
I'm hearing is
I'm just letting the Mutable know that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is people are fighting for the idea that a loss of genetic information,
No.
something that is not attributed to negative effects, when that's exactly what modern science shows. See, so my contention, you won't
No,
like
it's
this.
not.
This is a little abrasive,
No, it's not.
but I've always said that
Nephilim?
in order to be an evolutionist today, you have to be a science.
I want you to cite your sources, please.
You give him
me
an
too.
inch, he'll take a mile.
All right. Let's let Immutable. Let's give Immutable
pretty
the
much.
floor so that he can get his night underway. He wanted to probably head out. Go ahead, Immutable.
Yeah, so I guess I'll use part of this as a closing statement as well. There's a few things kind of to mention. The first of which is that genetic information itself, yes, there is dependence on like what the sequence of nucleotides is, but an important thing is that it also depends, like it's spatiotemporal in nature as well. So the degree to which like you can call that type of thing information depends on other things the cell is doing, such as the preponderance of RNAs, like that could be promoters for the given gene and other things like that as well. Another really important thing is that regarding this issue of ENCODE, is that ENCODE over the past couple of years has gone through several renditions and kind of like coarse graining over what exactly they're defining functional to be. Because the first time around that they said it, they got the figure of like 87%, because what they were taking function to mean was function is any time any kind of genetic information is transcribed at all, although that gives you issues in terms of spurious transcription, which can produce RNAs and even amino acids like of arbitrary length that don't have any apparent function at all and just are degraded instantaneously. The other thing, though, is that luckily there are ways, like in the lab, to test for if a certain kind of genetic sequence might have function. And that would be, what do? Well, you excise the strain of genetic information you're interested in, and you place it in something like a bacterium, and you see if you try to get the bacterium to express it, and you see what it does. And does it have any function? And that's something that's ascertainable. So regarding the abiogenesis topic, abiogenesis is a really interesting thing. There's a lot of good and interesting questions regarding what would constitute or needed to be constitute like the first kind of like minimal cell and stuff like that. although those conversations have been had and fleshed out to some extent here, but also will be discussed probably at a later time. So anyways, take care. Happy holidays, and
thanks so
see you
much
around.
for coming on, Immutable. It's good to have you on again.
Thanks, Immutable. It's nice to see you. All right, let's.
Yep.
I'm going to pass the torch to Drace since Sylvester had a. Unless we want to give Nephilim the floor to respond to what.
Yeah, I would respond by just providing this from Dan Reynolds, PhD organic chemistry. I quote him. Recent research into the Encyclopedia of DNA Elements, or ENCODE, project has shown that most non-coding, that means doesn't make proteins, most non-coding DNA, approximately, they say greater than 80%, is transcribed into RNA. The non-coding RNA has been found to have many regulatory and other functions, including repairing DNA, assisting DNA replication, regulating DNA transcription, aiding in folding and maintenance of chromosomes, controlling RNA editing and splicing, helping fight disease, regulating embryonic development, and communication between cells. Wow. A lot of critical functions there. So the junk DNA paradigm has been overthrown because of the modern science about finding out what DNA does. The DNA is almost certainly functional no matter where you point to it. So junk DNA paradigm was thrown out 25 years ago.
Okay, let's give the floor to Drace right now to make. Is that James? Sorry, I keep stepping on.
No, you're good. No. Drace, yes. Drace is there.
All right. Well, I guess I'll just I'll share my thoughts about some of the stuff that I've been hearing from Nephilim. He started off by criticizing origin of life research in terms of how fine-tuned the experiments are. But the whole reason that they're fine-tuned is because they're trying to fine-tune it to the Hadean environment. That's the whole point. That's the reason for the delicacy, is to make sure that this reaction mimics what's going on Hadean Earth. And so there are particular researchers over the course of time that have been criticized for for not following a close enough protocol to match up with a Hadean environment. But there are a ton of papers out there that are all specifically geared. Almost every single time you hear something about prebiotic synthesis of something on a paper, they're specifically gearing their experiments to line up with what's going on in a Hadean environment. And that's the whole reason for the for the delicacy of the experiment. He talked about using parts of bacteria or viruses in the experiments, but that's mostly in synthetic biology or in later steps of abiogenesis. It doesn't have any bearing on all the different papers out there that just start with your basic inorganic ingredients. So he's basically pretending that one subset of the overall experiments represents the entire field. With the junk DNA stuff, I think it's personally, because when the Nephilim, he used the word evolutionists always say junk, but a lot of the people that he quoted from are people who support evolution but just don't think that there's junk. And so this is something that could be debated within evolution. How much junk is there really? And I don't think it's true that junk DNA has been overturned. There's a shit ton of population geneticists and other researchers who are still arguing for it based on things like the C-value paradox, based on the fact that a lot of the examples that Nephilim gives about for example, getting taken up in embryonic development or regulation and things like that. Researchers knew ahead of time that there are a bunch of non-coding. There was a bunch going on in terms of non-coding RNA that had function, but so far, the number discovered throughout the genome that have been functional in comparison to the total is still extremely small, and so there still is room for a lot of junk, and this also gets into neutral theory. This also gets into neutral theory in terms of how he describes genetic information as always going down, but this has to do with things like deletions and stuff, and doesn't account for things like duplications. And duplications can undergo they can gain new functions and go under two different kinds. You have subfunctionalization and neofunctionalization. And neofunctionalization is like the closest thing that really gets at the core of what most creationists mean by new functional information that involves no loss at all. And so, like, basically, I think that he mischaracterizes a lot that's going on in both of these fields in terms of junk DNA and origin of life. But I think that's part and parcel of our good old Nephilim 3.
All right, now Neff, you want to give your response to this one?
Sure. You just denied the junk DNA has been expunged from the mindset of the consensus of geneticists, and that's simply not true. It is not. You're denying late 20th century geneticists.
You're breaking Stephanie right now.
So,
if anybody says junk one more time on this stream, I am gonna literally pass out.
All right.
And in response to that, so I would cite you and Bernie, who states, should we be retiring the phrase junk DNA now? Yes. I think the phrase does need to be totally expunged from the lexicon. It was a slightly throwaway phrase to describe a very interesting phenomenon that was discovered in the 1970s. I'm now convinced that it's just not very useful way of describing what's going on. So it is not, you're misrepresenting the information. Junk DNA is a bad idea. So, and then you said the problem of
okay. I see the
you guys give him the floor, please.
You mentioned the problem with the controlled experiments utilizing components of bacteria and whatnot as mechanisms for the experiment. But that's just begging the question. You're pointing to something that would have come about later in your imagined abiogenesis than the abiogenesis itself. You're already talking about transcriptase and polymerase and other molecular machinery that's had to evolve. You're not showing that they could even evolve. And moreover, here's the worst problem for you probably. These molecular machines in the cell, like transcriptase, polymerase, whatnot, are products of their own translation. For example, this is a terrible chicken and egg problem for abiogenesis and for evolution theory. For example, the polymerase machine that attaches to DNA and runs down the strand of DNA to copy off a piece of it so that it can be used to make an RNA is comprised of the very proteins that it transcribes. In other words, there is a cipher. Imagine you have a book and it's written in a language nobody understands. There is a cipher that tells you how to decode that language. The problem is it's encoded inside the book in the language that you can't read. You can't get it out. So without the machine, you don't get the protein. Without the protein, you don't get the machine. See, this is a stumbling block for abiogenesis. So you're talking about starting the process of this experiment with machines that had to have evolved, and yet they are necessary for the proteins that are encoded in the DNA to make them, but you don't get the machine without transcribing it first. See, so that's called a chicken and egg problem, and it's one of the biggest problems for abiogenesis.
Let's give Drace a.
I don't know if you guys actually understood what I said because somebody was very irreverently laughing.
We understood.
I'm cracking up here.
You should try, being a little more cordial, a little more.
I know I should be very, very serious.
Let's give Drace a closer / response to this final statement here, and then we will let either Porpoise or Stephanie have at it if whoever James wants to let finish first.
Fine.
All right. So so you quoted a scientist to the effect that junk DNA should not be a thing, but I'll counter with a citation of Larry Moran. What's in your genome? 90% of it is junk, which was published just this year, 2023. And so what you see is actually researchers are debating this question back and forth, and the idea of junk DNA is far from dead. I think that I can't make a determination about how much of the genome is junk. I could just speak to the fact that those people who do believe in junk have made a persuasive case to me that it definitely is part of the story. But as to any specific quantity, I have not been able to make that determination yet. To like the thing about bacteria, like I think you totally missed the point. The point was that this is just a subset of the experiments that are done in Origin of Life. So like when you pretend as if like all of these experiments are just using this stuff that they already got from life, you're ignoring tons of experiments that don't start with any living components at all, that start working bottom up from scratch using just basic inorganic ingredients. And it's the success of those experiments that have allowed us to understand the mechanisms as to how these biomolecules come about, and justifies us doing these other experiments as well. Once you start getting to this more sophisticated level of polynucleotides and polypeptides encased within membranes, absorbed into clay layers or on the surfaces of minerals, the kinds of things that are going on there. And to close with like the whole chicken and egg thing, that's part of the solution to a lot of that, is the fact that you're not looking at just one coming first. Like it's not just RNA coming first or peptides coming first. It's a co-evolutionary story of all these things together, and it's the interactions between those things that give rise to things like the genetic code and interactomes and all sorts of crazy sophisticated things later on.
Okay. Well, to that I would respond, pointing out that some guy still considers much of the DNA to be junk at this time in science is pointing to the guy who's an outlier and probably not very well liked by his peers. According to Dr. John Greeley of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, New York, he states, it would now take a very brave person to call non-coding DNA junk. Okay, these kinds of admissions have been made for the last 25 years. Okay, the general consensus of scientists today is that DNA can't be considered junk just because we don't know the function of a particular sequence or strand. It almost certainly does, because 80% of it is now known to be transcribed into RNA. 80 at least. And even Bernie, for example, believes when we study it long enough, we'll find that pretty much all of it does. So junk DNA is on the chopping block. It's dying. The reason that you can point to an academic here and there who still argue for it is because evolutionists have a hard time giving up some bad ideas out of their cold, dead hands. You have to pry it out of them with modern science. They're slow. Okay. So now, when you mentioned these experiments, you didn't really address the chicken and egg problem. You're still acknowledging that but you went further and put forth a truly bizarre and outrageous claim that it's possible that these molecular machines evolved at the same time the RNA was evolving. And that's like saying I'm going to go into a casino and pull the handle on a slot machine and I'm going to win the jackpot every single time. Every day this month. The odds of that are insane because of the specificity of these of these machines to the molecules that they relate. Moreover, you didn't address the problem of this these machines being a product of their own translation. I'll say again, for example, polymerase is a product of its own translation. It is the machine that runs down the DNA and copies the strand of DNA information into RNA that becomes a protein. The problem is you don't get the polymerase unless you already have the protein. It is made of the very proteins that it transcribes. You can't get polymerase without reading the information from the DNA. Okay, you can't get the DNA without the machine to read it. They're interdependent in a way they cannot be broken. This is called irreducible complexity.
All right, we're going to pass the torch now here. Who wants to take it? I'll let you ladies decide.
I think Stephanie has been dying to jump in.
I'm just, first of all, if you'd like me to go next, I will, and I will be concise. First of all, Merry Christmas, Nephilim Free. I hope you have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask Stephanie if she caught the comprehension error I did.
I'm sorry?
Did you catch his reading comprehension error he's been making all along?
I've been laughing too hard, actually, and I apologize.
Let's not get into the meta, guys.
I'm laughing at the continuous use of the word junk because it had me thinking of other things that are not suitable for discussion on YouTube. But you know, I think Nephilim, with all and sincerely due respect, you've clearly done an awful lot of research into this stuff. I'm a mere sailmaker. I don't know. I'll tell you though that I find the very notion that loss of information is in and of itself deleterious to the function of an organism seems a misguided notion. And please don't cite 25 studies that say that I'm wrong. Just if you think about it, a little bit, inherently, the loss of, let's not call it junk, let's just call it bad information.
You're presuming to know the function of it, and then
I'm not presuming, and no, I am not presuming. I'm not going to let him finish because
I told him to let you finish. Please go on.
Thank you, Bree. Thank you, Bree. Thank you, Bree. I think it is. No, I don't know the function of these things. You presume to know whether these things have in fact been lost. And you presume to know that the loss of these things are deleterious. You haven't presented any evidence whatsoever that A, these things have been lost, and B, that the effect of their loss is deleterious. So therefore, you're building this case that the loss of information disproves the capacity. You know, that you're trying to make a negative be a universal negative, and that seems to me to be misguided, because you're right. I don't know what these things do, and neither do you. And I don't presume that it is inherently negative that information is lost. You do, and in either case, if information is lost or information is gained, that's evolution.
I would just point again to the numerous studies that state DNA sequences that were previously assumed to not have function or continuously discovered more and more. The more they study, they have function. Oh no, we thought this didn't have function. We know it does. This happens over and constantly. It's pervasive, and that is why the junk DNA paradigm has been discarded. And scientists, the ones in the know, the preponderance of scientists that deal with genetics, don't use the term anymore because it's not rational to use it, considering 80% or more of the DNA is now known to be transcribed into RNA. To consider DNA still junk, what you have to do is assume that even though it's transcribed into RNA, which is the workhorse of the cell, is to assume that those RNAs are meaningless garbage. Why would evolution create so much DNA that's filling the cell with RNAs that are worthless and now junk and clutter and garbage in the cell? It makes no sense. You're just not getting on board with 20th century genetics.
Well, we're in the 21st century. Sorry.
And you clearly didn't hear a single word I said.
I understood everything
you didn't address my argument in the least. No, you didn't.
Addressed it.
Let's give Sinister Porpoise the spotlight for just a minute, and let them chime in with a little bit of input.
I've noticed something that it's an easy mistake to make. I've done it, especially when reading papers from sciences I've never studied. And it seems to me that the mistake here being made is that the argument is that the term junk DNA should be encoded in favor of non-encoding DNA, which the sources Nephilim is citing actually says, and even he said that they say that. He's just trying to put his own spin on it, possibly because he's misinterpreting it. It's very easy to misinterpret papers from sciences you've never studied. And even if you have studied the science, I don't always understand every machine learning and artificial intelligence paper I come across first time either. So yeah, if he had read them better and understood them a little more thoroughly, he would be on the right track. He was saying the term junk DNA is being abandoned in favor of non-encoding DNA, which is the arguments from the people he's quoting.
I haven't done that. I'll give you an example. Let's say you provide somebody with a compact disc
You're giving us the
that has
same example over and
information.
over.
Sinister, let him
Let's
respond.
say you present someone with a compact disc that has information that encodes the installation of Microsoft Windows 11.
You mean data, right?
And somebody you hand that to somebody. Now somebody says, well, I don't know what all this does, therefore it must be junk. But we only need this much of it. Would that be plausible? That's not a plausible position. The plausible position is, well, it's all important information and it all has function. Just because you could delete certain portions of that and still get Windows to boot on a computer, you're going to start clicking around and find, oh no, function not available, computer crash, whatnot, because you're missing information. So it's just irrational in the 20th century or the 21st to say that this, because we don't know the function of this, it likely is functionless when scientists are continually discovering function in strands of DNA that they did not know had function before. In fact, 80% of it or more is now known to be transcribed into RNA, which is the workhorse of the cell. The junk DNA paradigm is dead. It's dead. You have to give it up.
Okay, well, I want to welcome Beamsy to the stream tonight. I think we're about wrapping up here, but
broke my word. But I wanted to bring Beamsy on, see if he wanted to throw his 2 cents in at Neffy.
Well, it is very much a malformed statement that you're making, Nephilim. The idea of junk DNA hasn't been used since 2007 in any academia reference. If you would have looked up some of the papers by Dr. Wojciech Mazolski from the Pennsylvania State University, he would have expressed that using the terms of junk is bad because junk usually means useless or bad. That is why the terms non-coding DNA is used, because in some cases that non-coding DNA could actually be used for something as a basis for, as you would have put it, the main program. Also, using a example of a completed program and then deleting things from that existing program, again, malformed statement, because evolution is plastic to the environment. It is not, it is a blind process. It is not something that comes with a goal in mind. That's why using anything that is manufactured or anything that is actually preformed, you cannot use that as an example. You have to use something that is blind and fits to the environment.
Okay, I appreciate you acknowledging that the junk DNA paradigm has been cast out by that consensus of scientists today, because it's been discovered that the more they study DNA, the more they find function in what was once considered to be junk, and it's now a worthless idea. I thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. Before, I guess I'm gonna take a turn here if it's okay. But since we're tying back to junk DNA, I mean, Nephilim responded basically saying well, I can find just one hack, who will still hold on to the idea of junk DNA. But the fact of the matter is, it's not just one hack. It's literally tons of people in population genetics and biochemistry and elsewhere. Yes, there are. And so absolutely there is. And you can find many examples of these population geneticists who still argue strongly in favor of junk DNA based on the arguments that I gave before. Things like the C-value paradox, where you take a look at something like an onion, the genome size of which is orders of magnitude greater than ours. So when you see so many different examples of that, you see that there's no real correlation between genome size and complexity. And so somebody like Nephilim is going to have to give an answer. What the hell does an onion need with orders of magnitude more in terms of its genome size than a human being? What are all the functions that are going on with the onion that it needs all that stuff? And so there are legitimate reasons why these researchers, and there are many of them, irrespective of what Nephilim would have you believe, who hold to these reasons for why junk DNA continues to be a thing. Like I said, this is something that is not should not be construed as a debate between evolution versus creation, because there are different people who support evolution who believe different things on the topic.
Well, we are at 3 hours right now, so I'm gonna hop in here real quick and say I don't have any more time left to give to this conversation.
Thank
but
you
if
so
James
much,
wants to
Bree.
keep, yeah, nope, I'm happy to help. If you want to keep things going, or if you want to do a round
I
robin
can't
of
stay much
closing,
longer. I would say that we'll give maybe everybody one more chance. I have to be at work in a few hours. So, yeah.
Well, before going, I would simply point out that much of this alleged previously thought to be junk DNA is now known to do numerous things. And one of the first scientists that I cited, Dr. Reynolds, who says even strands of non-coding repetitious DNA are now known to be structural machine components of DNA. They assist in DNA replication, regulating transcription, aiding in folding and maintenance of chromosomes, control RNA editing and splicing, etc. etc. So some of it, even if it doesn't have biochemical functions, is structural in order in purpose. So, like, imagine a building with all the steel girders on the inside that help support the building. It's the rooms that are really important, right? But you take away the structural design of the thing, and the building collapses. That's what much of this, some of these repetitious strands of DNA that are once considered junk because they're repetitious are now known to do. They actually help fold the DNA and supercoil it into structural components that are useful and aid in the expression of genetic information by unfolding and unwrapping DNA at certain loci so that machines can attach and read information from it. So they're structural at the very least. So it's just that evolutionists have a hard time giving up false scientific ideas when modern continuous new research shows that their idea was wrong all along. Yeah. And with that, I guess I'm going to have to go. It's late and I have something to do, but I appreciate the conversation, you guys, and I can't stay on all night.
Merry Christmas, Neff. Thank you so much for entertaining us.
And
Good night,
well.
Neff.
Yep, be well. Take care.
Merry Christmas.
Nephilim again used both the points that I had brought up to him, in which he was using misnomers, in which you cannot use a manufactured item to show biology, because biology is plastic to the environment. It is not something with a goal in mind. This time, instead of a program, he used a building. Again, he's full of it. The second thing he used is junk DNA is not referred to as junk DNA anymore because we have a greater understanding of it from the 1990s. And since 2007, with academia, it is referred to as non-encoding DNA. It is still junk DNA. The paradigm of junk DNA is still there. It has just been renamed to be much more accurate. This is like people saying that the book A Universe from Nothing shows that atheists believe that the universe came from nothing.
Or it just shows God particle.
Yeah. It just shows they have no understanding of what any
Praise
of these
the Higgs
actually
boson.
mean.
Worship the Higgs boson.
See, the thing that I have, the problem that I have with this, though, like, I mean, because I just got done going through Larry Moran's book, and I've come across like his basic case from a lot of other scientists, and what they're saying is that like this idea that scientists thought that everything that didn't code was just junk is a false narrative, that they knew that there was a bunch going on outside of coding that was important. And so, but nevertheless, they still said that there are things legitimately in the genome that are junk that don't do a goddamn thing. And they built their case based on a bunch of different arguments. So like with the idea of using the term non-encoding DNA, that's fine. But at the same time, I still got to stomp my foot in favor of these guys. I'm not sure whether or not they ultimately will end up right in the exact picture that they have, the kind of percentage of the genome they consider functional, all that, but they do still stand by the idea that there's legitimate junk in the sense of not doing anything currently. Not doing any. Actually, let me close with saying not doing anything that was selected for, because that's really important in terms of understanding what we mean by function.
Nephilim Free was the big what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying not to be too mean here. But I remember R and Raw having some issues with him in the past, so. But it's very easy to read something about a field you've never studied and misinterpret it. And he's either misinterpreting it deliberately because I caught on, it's like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't, what you're saying is not what these people have said. They're just arguing to not use the term junk DNA, instead use non-encoding.
They still support Darwinian evolution.
And coming back to another point, I personally don't like it when people don't define information and try to use the informatics analogy without
interchanging data and information is always just the funniest thing, because data can be useless. Data can be completely useless.
I think Beamsy put it best, and it was a point I was going to bring up in the discussion. It's like, you can't, engineering is not biology. Biology is not engineering. And medical science is not physics.
And computer science is not biology.
The fields are the approach. The scientific approach can be the same, but they're operating in different arenas, and you can't talk strictly in terms of computer science when speaking in terms of biological processes any more than you can do the same with astrophysics and medicine. I mean, I'm not dumping on you, Porpoise, because you're absolutely right about information science, but those terms,
let me say something.
They don't translate well.
I'm absolutely fine with them using the analogy as long as they use it correctly, define information, and understand its analogy. It breaks down. If you want to say DNA works like a computer code, great. You can even compare it to certain languages. The one it most makes sense to, in my mind, is an assembly language. But it doesn't do what computers do.
No, it doesn't. And we don't do what computers do. Life doesn't do what computers do. Life is different. Works different. And, and analogies, this is where a lot of lay people, myself included, the people that are maybe not up on, on understanding the Einstein equation, not the E equals MC squared one, but the one that deals with scalar fields and all of that other stuff. I don't have the math for that. The people that can translate that into English to me are invaluable, because it gives me at least some notion as to what's going on. But words in scientific fields, in the fields of science, have to be by necessity analogies to the math and to the processes that are being looked at.
I think the map and the place.
It's exactly it's the map place dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to describe something that can only be understood, and Grayson referred to this about the debate, getting back and trying to tie this and wrap this all up in a bow. He talked about that about his language in the debate was of necessity. He was trying to lay the groundwork and trying to describe in English to a lay audience the field that he's working in. And a lot of people just don't get there. And, the people that are determined to make the case for creation or for intelligent design or all of these things, use the language to attack the concepts that they don't really quite grasp. And rather than investigating it to really understand what's being said, they just say, well, no. We're this Bible thing here says something else.
Well, I think
and that's it's a tough row to hoe. It's a tough row to hoe. It's P-Town's tough row to hoe. What are you gonna do with somebody who thinks the world's 6,000 years old? What are you gonna do?
Get him to define what blobs are.
Can I just take a quick second to plug something? I just want to let everybody know that in 2024, I am launching my own debate channel, where I will be I'll be hosting and moderating for the most part, but I am going to be I have a great lineup of people who are who have agreed to come on and do at least one debate for us, including the owner of this channel we're on right now, Amy Newman, said she wants to participate, and she's given me an enthusiastic thumbs up. James hasn't responded.
I got your message, but yeah,
I don't want to make you commit to anything, babe. If you want to do a debate, though.
Come on, Bree. I like debates. You know me. I'm always down for a debate.
So I've got a thumbs up from Grayson, who you all watched tonight. So both the interlocutors from tonight's debate have agreed to come on. I got Mark Reed lined up. On the other side, I've got Indiana Joe from Creation Research and John Mackey, the young Earth creationist. They're pretty chill young Earth creationists. I think we have a good conversation with them.
Joe Hubbard.
Indiana Joe Hubbard, you got that right. And also Cindy Lincoln, Kent Hovind's ex-wife. And we've had her on this channel as well, doing a debate with me.
A few times, yeah.
Yeah. So look forward to that. And I'm actually, if you don't mind, going to drop the link in the side chat for everybody so that they can go check out the channel. So thank you for letting me plug that.
Your regular Bumblebee Hive Science?
No, it's going to be its own. It's going to be on its own channel.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely feel free to subscribe to the Hive, though. I'm always looking for
cryptids and all the other interesting things you talk about sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see here. So that's what I got coming up in the new year. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, come check it out.
Well,
that's really exciting, Bray. That's really super cool. Like it.
Someone needs to do a debate with Kyle Adams over whether or not he has cognitive dissonance.
Well, that would be a tough
Brian Adams
debate.
Kyle Adams.
How are you gonna?
I'm trying to think of who that is.
Yeah, but still, how are you gonna get anybody to? You're working with cognitive dissonance in the affirmative, arguing in the affirmative. Wait a minute. How do you argue in the affirmative if you're dissonant, or the negative for that matter? That's rather curious.
Well, as an ex-Mormon who went through it, it's like, yes, Kyle Adams has cognitive dissonance, but arguing that just look at him is not.
Yeah, well, it's fine. Look at this.
I'm gonna head out pretty soon, but I did want to say actually before leaving to Bree that I might sign up to do a debate on your channel if you'll have me at some point.
Oh, awesome!
The
more the merrier. Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Roster. Yeah.
I'm pretty picky about like my opponents. So like if I come across somebody that I would like to debate on a topic, like I'll pitch your channel to them. I'm supposed to have a debate a few months from now, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But regardless, like every now and then I do come across some people who want to debate an interesting topic, and I think they make for a good opponent. And if that happens, I'll contact you.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Yeah. It's XBugbot113X. I'll drop it in the side chat here, actually, in a private chat.
Oh, good luck with your channel. Unfortunately, I can't really have my name too much out there right now because of my job, but
Yeah.
But you can still spectate. You can still be in the
Yeah.
stands.
I'd love your support.
I'd love
cheering
to
her on.
debate. I'd love to debate Professor Dave on the topic of trans women in sport.
That may be something we can set up for ya.
That would be an
I would
interesting
love
debate.
that. Or Stephen Woodford, or anyone who purports to be a trans ally and takes the position that trans women do not belong in sport.
Well, I mean, I guess that they're saying trans women are women most of the time, not all the time. I guess maybe
Not all the time, yeah.
not all the time. Yeah, which
Up until here.
Until you want to do that.
I'd love to have that. I'd love to have that. God knows God knows I've talked to plenty of people who take that position from based on theological grounds, shall we say, or at least coming from religion. But there are a number of people in the atheist community that take that position, and I think they're wrong.
Well, I'm on neither side of that argument because I see benefits and limits on both sides. That's why I don't see it as I see it as a no-win point, because you're going to either take away the rights of one people or you're going to take away the rights of another for personal reasons.
It's a nuanced conversation. It's a nuanced conversation that doesn't get held.
I see it as a Gregorian note.
I just want to wish you guys a good night. I'm heading out for now, but you guys have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Good
see
night,
it as a
have a good one
Gregorian.
too. Merry Christmas if you celebrate it.
Have a good holiday.
All right, guys. Anything else anyone wants to say real quick before I run the outros? Thanks everybody for watching, coming on the stream, and I want to wish everyone, if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. If you don't celebrate any of it like we do, well, that's okay too. Still have a good day.
Go Yule. I hope you had a vibrant fire and a well-laddered feast.
Winter solstice, but as Mark Reed said, if you're in the southern hemisphere, then it's summer. So
it's referred to as Yule, but whatever.
And if you're a Satru, be careful this time of year when the walls between the 9 worlds are thinnest and Odin's on his wild hunt.
That
yeah,
was
but
super
Stephanie,
important.
it is a conversation that I've been interested to have because I don't see it as a win on any side, regardless of the way it goes. Because how do you sort this out from what is right and what is wrong when it's so nuanced? And all I see it as a Gregorian knot that I cannot see the start of.
Well, we can have a long conversation about it if you want, Jamesy, but probably not tonight because James wants to go. The point is that it hasn't ever been a problem. It just hasn't ever been a problem, and I've been dealing with it for 25 years.
But the situation that is arising
the only reason it is a problem now is because the way sports federations have handled it, people don't know. Sports federation. It's not like this isn't anything new. I mean, I literally had to go through the whole fucking process, so I know it from a personal level. And it's the people outside of the games are making decisions about things they know nothing about.
That's why I see it as a Gregorian knot.
Well, it's not. It's really actually quite easy. It's really actually quite easy, and the sporting federations have done their due diligence and have worked overtime to hew to the notion that sport is a human right and that inclusion.
Finish your point. That was an accident.
Yeah. People of all sorts should have a way to play.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can find some common ground on that and really suss out the issues, see what's what, and come to a reasonable consensus. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for staying with us. Have a great night.